Chapter 22:11. The Taoist did not panic and laughed. Humans are indeed intelligent. Even a small cultivator like you can't fool you. I have no ill intentions. I originally wanted to do some business here to redeem the remains of my fellow clansmen, but I was a step too late. This is also a good way to deal with it. Under the flames, return to where you came from. You have a heart of great virtue and a desire to worship life, surpassing the majority of humans. Lu Xiaoyi disagreed. I can do this only because I came from afar. I don't feel any pain from the war between humans and winged men, but it's not because I have any great virtue. It's very funny to talk about great virtue under hatred, so don't distinguish me from other humans. To be honest, deep down, there's only one kind of human, just like there is only one kind of winged man. The Taoist was startled, then laughed self-deprecatingly. Well said. I'm too shallow. But no matter what, your actions are admirable. You truly regard the equality of the cultivation races in the universe as the ideal of cultivation. I have high hopes for you. Since you have a virtue, you must repay it. I have a Mingdi here. Take it. If you encounter my winged men in the future, who knows, you might be able to turn misfortune into fortune. He threw something at him, turned around, and left without looking back. A mere human nascent soul stage cultivator was not worth wasting too much of his time. Lu Xiaoyi took the Mingdi and roughly understood the meaning of the great wings of heaven. It was probably something that the winged men used to communicate with each other. Once they blew on it, they would know that it was one of them, similar to the principle of a signal transponder. He had long known that this winged man was following him, starting from the moment he bought all the bottles of that true monarch. He originally thought that this was a hidden line set up by the Bamboo Hat Gang, so he used the opportunity of burning bones to lure the winged man here. He could negotiate with both sides without any delay. If it was in the air, it would be too conspicuous. He did not expect that it was a misunderstanding. This was just a great wings of heaven who had set up a stall in the immortal palace. Of course, he definitely had his own motives, but it had nothing to do with Lu Xiaoyi. He had obtained a Mingdi, and if he really went to wing spread skies, he might be able to use it. His luck was not bad. Good people always had good karma. Returning to the market square, he continued his leisurely stroll. Before he knew it, he had arrived at the area where all kinds of pet beasts were being traded. This area was much livelier, not because of the change in attitude of the cultivators, but because the pet beasts that had been brought out for public display weren't very well behaved. Their roars were incessant, and their eyes were fierce. They were all straightforward and didn't know how to hide their emotions. Releasing the pet beasts was also to make it easier for the customers to choose from. Every cultivator had their own preferences, uses, and preferences. It might even be related to their cultivation techniques and orthodoxies. But nearly half of the pet beasts here were winged beasts. Could this be related to the proximity of the winged sky-soar mountain? Lu Xiaoyi naturally didn't care about the quality of these beasts. If he was willing, he had many chances to take in demonic beasts of the half-immortal level. There were even primordial beasts that were willing to follow him. Phoenixes, heavenly foxes, black dragons, Shangliu, Fei, great geese, peacocks, and so on. If he wanted to gather a group of demonic beasts and spirit pets, he would be able to embarrass the strongest orthodoxy in the universe to death. But he couldn't do that. He had so many demonic beasts as friends because he treated them as equals. He never treated himself as their master. This wasn't a hypocrite, but a philosophy that was deeply rooted in his bloodline. He could let the demonic beasts feel it at the first moment. Thus, a very strange phenomenon occurred. When he passed by groups of pet beasts, those pet beasts would look at him eagerly, hoping that he would take them away. Unfortunately, he couldn't. In the eyes of these stall owners, he was a cultivator who was proficient in beast taming. People like this were rare, but they weren't the only ones. People like this might have true beast taming skills, but they definitely weren't good customers. They were too picky and couldn't be fooled. Lu Xiaoyi didn't go and cause trouble for them. He walked around and came to a place that sold mountain beasts. Mountain beasts refer to those demonic beasts that lived in the world domain. They leaned towards the species that humans are more familiar with, such as lions, tigers, bears, leopards, and so on. In a high-level beast taming market, such demonic beasts weren't popular. The truly popular top-grade beasts were the strange beasts and demonic beasts that were used to living in the void of the universe. So this stall was a little deserted. Different from other beast taming markets, this stall owner's method of selling was very special. He didn't let these mountain beasts out for people to look at and choose. Instead, he put them all into a large spirit beast bag. It was a blind selection. According to the stall owner, there was a monarch-level beast inside. As long as you were lucky, you might be able to get it at a lower price. It was just a sales strategy. He used a monarch-level beast to arouse the interest of the buyers and then sold those inferior beasts that couldn't be sold. The real beast would definitely be there, but you definitely wouldn't be able to touch it. This was the true essence of this kind of trick. It was just like catching a blind box. You could see the most expensive one, but you would never be able to catch it. Here, you couldn't even see the beast taming market. No cultivator was a fool. This kind of trick could be played with middle and low-level cultivators. In a place like the Immortal Palace, everyone's realm was at least yuanying. Who would be greedy for such a small advantage? So, the stall was deserted and no one came to patronize it. The stall owner was a cultivator who came from afar. He thought that he could make a big profit in the front, but who knew that the cultivators here weren't interested in his mountain beasts. However, he was a stubborn person. Even if no one came to patronize him, he didn't change his sales strategy. Lu Xiaoyi was interested. He handed over a spiritual tablet and got a chance to buy a spirit beast bag. What is that monarch-level beast? The stall owner said coldly, a six-winged oyster. Lu Xiaoyi smiled and didn't say much. He put his hand into the spirit beast bag. Before he could stir it, he felt a certain spirit beast bite him. He couldn't help but laugh. So it wasn't me who chose the beast, but the beast who chose me. He didn't dawdle and retracted his right hand. He saw a small white tiger hanging from his palm. It had a strong head and was stubbornly biting down on him, refusing to let go. He laughed. 100 strands of spiritual tablet. And you bought this? White tigers were actually very common among mountain beasts. They were only slightly stronger than normal beasts. There were also black tigers, golden tigers, winged tigers, eagle tigers, ghost tigers, bone tigers, and other precious breeds. In the mortal world, they were extraordinary, but in the cultivation world, they were completely insignificant. Maybe your luck will change if you draw one more time, the stall owner urged. Lu Xiaoyi laughed. Do you think I'm stupid? If you do it again, I'll definitely take all of your mountain breaker beasts. With one hand holding the tiger's skin behind the white tiger's neck, he strolled away. The people around him shook their heads. So what if he was good at controlling beasts? Since greed had arisen, then he would still have to suffer. Only the stall owner was left there. He felt a little strange. Among the mountain beasts he caught in his own domain, there didn't seem to be a white tiger. There was a white bear, but it was completely unrelated. Did he remember wrongly? Chapter 22:12. P.S. The double holiday is coming to an end. Thank you for your support. I'll say a few more words. The Sword Soldier book is about to reach the end. Sloth is satisfied with this book as it makes up for the regrets of the Sword Apprentice. Although some readers think it's not as hot-blooded as the Sword Apprentice, the two protagonists can't be the same. Sloth is satisfied with this book as he didn't fool everyone. If you read it in one go, you'll understand what sloth means. It's not worse than the Sword Apprentice. What's worse is the result. After May, the subscriptions of the Sword Soldier plummeted and fell out of the top 100. It's a pity. An author has to pay a lot for a book, especially someone like Sloth who has OCD. He doesn't want to fool everyone. Sloth never advertises or runs a business. He only does his part as a writer. Now it seems that it doesn't conform to the reality of this era. If you're aloof and reserved, no one will care about you. Only old readers like you can only earn a few yuan a month. You can't even afford a simple breakfast. Let's go back to the starting point and give Sloth some motivation. A true scholar should finish what he started. Thank you again for your support. Thank you. Lu Xiaoyi carried the little white tiger without any scruples, but he didn't take it seriously. Old White, do you have to be so careful? You're acting like a spy meeting? The white tiger snorted. Do you think I want to do this? I'm old, so why are you carrying me around? Why do I have to pretend to be childish and cute? The circle of the old cultivators in the interior heaven is much deeper than you think. For hundreds of thousands of years, they've supported the vanguard star in every war. Their relationship with the cultivators here is complicated and complicated. It's better to have less trouble. For me, being brought here by you reduces a lot of karma. Lu Xiaoyi smiled bitterly. This kind of karma is really easy to deceive. Isn't it just deceiving oneself and others? But, Old White, how did you know I'd be sent here? The old white tiger snorted. There are a few evergreen trees in the circle of the old cultivators in the interior heaven. I'm one of them. It's just that I'm not human, so I'm not accepted. But I have connections among the old cultivators. As soon as they made the announcement, I knew it would fall on your head. You brat, you didn't keep your word. You said that you would inform me before you left. Why'd you go back on your word? Are you looking down on me because you think I'll cause you trouble? Lu Xiaoyi blushed with shame. Oh, Bai, you're wrongly accusing me. The place I'm staying at has long been under surveillance. No matter what method I use, it'll be very difficult for news to spread. As long as it spreads, they'll immediately know that Bai will be moving with me. That's artificially increasing the difficulty. So, the white tiger sneered, your plan is quite thorough. Although I don't meddle in other people's business, I haven't lost my teeth yet. I had my own arrangements in Eagle Cliff. When I came out, I didn't directly project it from the interior sky. Instead, I projected it from another universe. They wouldn't know about it. All right, you don't have to discuss with me what you're going to do next. Just do what you need to do. It won't be too late for me to help you when you're in trouble. Give me a spirit beast pouch. If I'm carried by you like this, people will see through it sooner or later. Don't think that you can do whatever you want just because everyone's realm is lower than yours on the front star. The waters are deep here. I'm getting old. I didn't expect that I'd have to enter the spirit beast pouch one day. What bad luck. Lu Xiaoyi knew that he was telling the truth. These old seniors had strange tempers, but they were very cautious when they did things. They were watertight. So he smiled and said, how can I let you enter the spirit beast pouch? Oh, Bai. Even I can't let you in. Why don't you enter a small world? I've made quite a few small world spaces recently, and some of them are quite good. You'll definitely like them. He threw Bai into a new small world space. He was basically done with the necessary preparations. It was time to find the informant who reported Zerg's movements on the front star. In his mind, this informant was very likely to be in cahoots with the interior celestial cultivators or a scapegoat that they pushed out. But no matter what, he still had to follow the procedure. Yizhang Tian belonged to a place where he could go or not go. In his plan, this wasn't an indispensable place. He had basically grasped more than half of the core strength of the universe's demon beasts. There was no need for him to completely grasp it, because it was also impossible. But since the bamboo had brought him here, it could be considered killing two birds with one stone. So he did not have any intention to resist coming to Wing-Spread Sky. The Wing people were the descendants of the Great Rock, and the Great Rock was one of the two kings of the 10,000 beasts. He had never been able to grasp the pulse of this race. This was a good opportunity to test the Great Rock's background and see if it was an enemy. Or was it just because of his pride? Without a purpose, he would be manipulated by others. This was not his character. If he rashly looked for the Great Rock without a reason, he might not be able to find out the truth. Just like this trip to Wing-Spread Sky, there was the conspiracy behind the bamboo hat and the demigod cultivators. The winged people hated the humans, especially the swordsmen. Only in this kind of life and death situation could he truly see the Great Rock's attitude. In Lu Xiaoyi's plans, the future of power lay in the struggle between humans, demonic beasts, and spiritual treasures. It was impossible for him to gain widespread support from a human race, because the human race was the most difficult to control. Currently, he had a certain amount of influence among a portion of the demonic geniuses in the Eastern Elephant Heavens and in the Kuan Dao. This was practically the limit of what he could do. If there were more, he wouldn't know where to start. The spiritual treasures were a different situation. He had an innate advantage, and the support of the heavenly eyes, innate spiritual treasures, led by the Lord of spiritual treasures. But he would not forget that this was actually the legacy of Li Wuya, and did not truly belong to him. He wanted to expand his influence among the spiritual treasures, but he did not know where to start. It felt like there was always a layer separating them, and he could not get close. On one hand, it was because he did not have many opportunities to communicate with the numinous treasure race. More likely, it was because the numinous treasure race was a race with a pure heart and few desires. Their favorable impressions were always faint and not as strong as those of the demonic beasts. He did not know if this faint favorable impression could be converted into actual support at a crucial moment, and he had no way of testing it. It was precisely because he could not fully grasp the two Dafa aspects of the human race and the spiritual treasures that he put in a lot of effort on the demons. Recently, his series of actions had basically revolved around the demons. If he wanted to achieve perfection, he could not ignore the existence of the Great Rock. He had to admit that although there were two kings among the 10,000 beasts, the Phoenix was more of a spiritual leader, while the Great Pung was more of a practical ruler. Especially among the original group of immemorial sacred beasts, it had a great reputation. He had to figure out the true attitude of this faction. Among the three main cultivation forces, he hoped to gain the absolute support of at least one side. He placed this hope on the demons. So far, the Great Rock was the last piece of the puzzle. This was his main goal. Otherwise, why would he run into a trap that was obviously dubbed by others? On this point, Li Wuya's biography clearly stated that he had fought countless battles and killed countless enemies in his life. It was not because of his combat strength that he could look down on the entire universe, but because he never played according to other people's intentions. He always made others unable to understand his actions. It was a habit. He never knew where he was going to go. What was he going to do? He always appeared in unexpected places and quickly left after stirring up **T. He always mobilized others, and not be mobilized by others. This was the true secret of Li Wuya's invincibility. Regarding this point, he had clearly stated it in his autobiography. He never hid anything. To put it bluntly, it was actually just a word. However, Li Wuya was no longer limited to being unrestrained in swordsmanship. He had expanded it to include the concept of cultivation and the value of life. This was also what Lu Xiaoyi advocated. Unrestrained. Even if you were a fly, it would be difficult for others to swat you. Chapter 22:13. In the immortal palace outside the Vanguard Star, there were countless large and small palaces that belonged to different orthodoxies. They were originally built to resist the invasion of the Winged Ones, making it easier for them to attack and fight. However, after nearly 2,000 years, the shadow of war was no longer there, but the shadow of the new era was even more unpredictable. Many of the smaller sects and orthodoxies no longer stationed their forces on the Immortal Palace. Only the most powerful sects and orthodoxies still kept their high-level cultivators here. It was not for the sake of war, but more for the sake of a gesture. Among the many palaces, there was a palace with a very unique style. Calling it style was not accurate, but more accurately, its color was a rich purple. It was completely different from the other palaces around it, which were basically all heavy colors. There were 3 large words on the plaque of the palace. Incense Hall. This was the palace of a famous sect on the Vanguard Star, the Incense Hall sect. The complete purple color made it look very different, as if it did not fit in with the entire Immortal Palace complex that was built for war. However, it stood there like this, never changing even after so many years. War should also have color, right? In the palace, several beautiful fairies stood solemnly. At the head of the table, a fairy in a purple robe frowned slightly, seemingly deep in thought. A sun god fairy below was reporting, "Ancestor Su, the situation is like this. A few decades ago, 2 other sisters and I went to the wing spread sky to collect the blue crystal cloud gauze. By chance, we found signs of Zerg's activity in the wing spread sky. We were very surprised, But due to the various restrictions on human activities in the wing spread sky, we were unable to investigate in detail, so we left it at that. At that time, we thought that it might be because the Winged Ones and Zerg both participated in the two universe wars in the Fifth Ring, and they belonged to the same faction, so it was normal for them to have some interactions. Until a few months ago, the Heavenly Eyes sent an order to all orthodoxies in the Origin world to report any signs of Zerg's suspicious activity in the past 1,000 years, to guard against a possible red tide. We thought, was what we saw in the wings spread sky a similar situation? For something like this, it was better to believe it than not, or else it would be irresponsible to all of humanity in the universe, so we reported it through our channels. Since the wing spread sky is not a place that our Origin world cultivators can easily enter and search, we could only leave it to the truly capable people of the Heavenly Eyes sect. That's the general situation, but I didn't expect to alarm Ancestor Sue. It's truly a great sin. The purple-robed woman called Ancestor Sue looked at them calmly. There was no reproach in her tone. Her magnetic voice had a unique charm that made people feel at ease and calm. Very good. Although the threat of the Winged Ones is temporarily gone, it's also very good that you're thinking of contributing to the survival of mankind. Not forgetting your original intentions is the purpose of our incense robe sect. Then try to recall the encounter with Zerg a few decades ago. Was there anything suspicious about the whole process? What I mean is it possible that someone is deliberately leading, guiding, and leading the rhythm? Although investigating the movements of the insectoids is a responsibility that cultivators like us cannot shirk away from, this place called Wings Spreading Heavens is too special. If we don't handle it well, we'll attract a fatal disaster. As the source of the report, my incense cloth sect also more or less bears some responsibility. Therefore, we need to be more cautious and consider more thoroughly. However, we don't really suspect that you have done anything wrong. The Sun Spirit Fairy thought about it carefully and communicated with the other sisters beside her. She replied, "In our opinion, there are no such signs. Back then, the whole journey was decided by us. How to find the Winged Ones to trade, how to choose the path. No outsiders were involved in the whole process. Of course, it was impossible for anyone to guide us. There are no stars in wing-spanning skies, only dust nebulas. We can't understand how Zerg's red light could use the nebula as a breeding ground, but this is not something we should consider. Of course, if Zerg and the Winged Ones work together to create this illusion during our journey, we really can't distinguish it. After all, the movements of humans in wing-spanning skies are very restricted. It's impossible for us to investigate the slightest abnormality. Moreover, that was decades ago, before the rumors of Zerg's red light spread. The purple-robed woman nodded slightly. She still trusted the disciples of her sect. She was born in the incense cloth sect and had been cultivating in the exterior realm. There were many such half-immortals in the frontline star. It had to be admitted that although the living environment here was bad, it was still very good for cultivators in the upper realm. This was the principle of the so-called environment tempering people. Less than 10,000 years of life in the fourth decay realm. Even in the exterior realm, there were very few people who were outstanding. In the incense cloth sect, only the previous sect leader had reached this level. She was the stabilizing force of the incense cloth sect. Regardless of whether it was when she was on planet Chinching or later when she was in the exterior realm, she had always used the most ancient standards of a cultivator to hold herself to. She had to abide by the rules and never cross the line. Others often laughed at her peerless beauty for having the old-fashioned temperament of an old nun. However, only she knew that this was the foundation of the Lavender Sect's establishment. Don't envy the prosperity of the outside world. Only seek inner peace. Back then, the sect leader, Fairy Liang Run, had taught her this. Cultivating in the exterior realm turned a deaf ear to the changes in the outside world and turned a blind eye to them. In the current chaotic situation, people like her were also a sect. There were many of them, and they could be considered circle. However, their circle didn't have cohesion. It was true that they were scattered sand, each minding their own business. The wind was moving, the clouds were moving, the universe was moving, the air was moving. No, what was really moving was the cultivator's heart. This was the core principle of their sect. Therefore, as long as they didn't move, nothing else would move. The so-called change of era was just a big threshold in the changes of the universe. There was nothing substantial about it. The universe was always moving. Could it be that the heart of cultivation would always move with it? If it moved, they just had to adapt to it. Why should they panic? There were countless theories about cultivation, but it was difficult to say that there was a definite conclusion. From the perspective of the heavenly way, some cultivators below moved, and some didn't in the changes of the universe. This was the normal balance. Moving was right. Not moving was also right. If you think it's right, then it's right. Therefore, even if the winds and clouds of the universe changed in the past few thousand years and heroes came out one after another, to a cultivator with a philosophy like hers, it was just a passing cloud. She didn't care about it and didn't pay attention to it. The only thing she paid attention to was her own cultivation. She would do what she should do. It wasn't until a cultivator who also came from the frontline star found her and told her that Zerg had appeared in the winged sky and that there was a danger of the Red Flood. Moreover, the news came from her sect, the Incense Cloth sect. Only then did her tranquil state of mind move slightly. Chapter 22:14. The Lavender sect's biggest weakness was that although they were Kuan cultivators, they dared to take the lead for humans. Although they were a Kuan cultivator sect, the sect's purpose was to always stand at the forefront of the fight against the alien race. They were not a sect born and bred on the Frontier Star. Instead, they migrated here after learning that the Frontier Star was at the front line of the fight against the Winged Man. As for which universe they migrated from, it was too long ago to know. There were many sects like them on the Frontier Star. One had to admit that when it came to fighting against the alien race, some sects had retreated to protect themselves, but there were also more who stood up. Whether it was the Winged Man, Zerg, or any other race that threatened the survival of humans, they were all their enemies. Therefore, when she received this news, she immediately considered whether there was anything wrong with the Lavender Sect's report, or if there was anything wrong with it. In a place like the exterior realm, even if she cultivated and recuperated, it was impossible for her to be completely ignorant of the outside world. Through a limited number of close friends, she was also very aware of some of the selfish and distracting thoughts of the human race when they eliminated the hidden danger of Zerg's red light. Using public power for personal gain, attacking for revenge, and eliminating dissidents were not clean. She did not want her sect to be involved in such dirty water, but at this point, it was obvious that the supremes of her own sect in the main world could not solve it. Therefore, she had no choice but to descend to the mortal world. This was the reason why she appeared in the Immortal Palace. Even if the pursuit of Zerg's traces had nothing to do with her for the time being, if it was related to the Lavender sect, it was related to her. After returning to the Immortal Palace, she gathered the Lavender sect disciples and interrogated them several times, but she did not seem to find anything out of the ordinary. However, she also knew that in the cultivation world, everything was not as simple as it seemed on the surface. She was still hesitating, wondering how she should stay out of this farce. It was the Lavender sect who reported the insect's tracks, which also involved the Lavender sect. There was no need to put the disciples under such pressure. They could not bear it, so she was the only one who could. However, she had not thought clearly about what she should do. The few Lavender fairies left the Immortal Palace. This matter no longer had anything to do with them. Naturally, Ancestor Sue would take the lead. Although she also suspected that she had caused some big trouble, this was already beyond the scope of what they could bear. The purple-robed fairy stood silently in the hall. She tried to find the most important thread from the messy ball of thread, but she couldn't find the door. Then, a few breaths approached the hall. They didn't hide their auras. Like her, they were also half immortals. Thus, she knew that all of this had probably already begun. 4 half-immortals entered the palace. The purple-robed fairy was familiar with 3 of them. They were all half immortals from the front star. Only one of them was unfamiliar. He had a young face and a calm demeanor. However, he seemed to be the leader of the four. Taoist Sheng Sheng was the oldest among them, and his status was also the highest. Whether it was in the front star or in the interior heaven, he was also her senior. He clasped his hands and introduced the two of them. This fairy is the sect ancestor of the Lavender sect, Fairy Su Run. Then, he introduced the unfamiliar cultivator. This is the famous Inspector Liu of the interior and exterior heaven. He is the leader of the younger generation in the great tide of the change of era. Today, we are fortunate to meet in the front star. Let's get to know each other better. The purple-robed fairy was slightly surprised. Of course, she had heard of this person. No matter how closed off the world was, who in the interior and exterior heaven didn't know of Inspector Liu's name? He had done countless great things, too many to count. Not to mention other things. Just the number of half-immortals who had been killed by him in the past few hundred years was already more than 50. It was only a matter of time before he reached the 3 digits. Everyone was discussing whether or not there would be more half-immortals who would die during the change of eras when the new era arrived, or more half-immortals would die in his hands. Greetings, Inspector Liu. So the thorough investigation of the wings, spreading heaven this time, was actually presided over by Inspector Liu? It seems that our previous worries don't matter. With Inspector Liu, what else can't be solved? Liu Xiaoyi returned the greeting. Sister Su Run is too polite. The work is done by everyone. I'm just adding bricks and tiles. The so-called wings, spreading heaven, is the first time for me. As a newcomer, I hope that all the seniors can help me. As the saying goes, a single tree can't form a forest, a single silk can't form a thread, and a single flower can't form spring. I'm a reckless guest from the outer domain, and I hope that everyone can help me. The few of them exchanged pleasantries and quickly got to the main topic. Taoist Sheng Sheng pulled the strings. Junior Sister Su, it's like this. Inspector Liu came here to find the few disciples who found the insect tracks to understand the specific situation at that time. There's no other meaning, mainly about the general location, direction, and other abnormalities. The more detailed, the better. It's also beneficial for Inspector Liu to carry out the investigation after entering the wings spreading heaven, right? That place has never been less hostile to us humans. Of course, we don't fear people like Inspector Liu, but I'm worried that if Inspector Liu kills too many, it will attract some unnecessary trouble. Junior Sister Su smiled slightly. Her expression was warm, but the meaning behind her words was very unyielding, like a needle hidden in silk floss. Unfortunately, I just ordered them to go out on a mission. However, I also understand Inspector Liu's intention. Just now, I asked about the entire process in detail, no matter how big or small. So why don't I answer? It's not that big of a deal. Liu Xiaoyi didn't insist. That's fine. It's the same no matter who says it. It's just for the sake of convenience, nothing else. He knew very well that this fairy Su Run said this because she was protecting the disciples of the Lavender sect. Otherwise, how could it be so coincidental that she went out on a mission? Was he, Liu Xiaoyi, so cruel that people would fear him like a snake? It was only human nature, so he didn't go overboard. Su Run recounted the entire process of her disciples encountering the insects in detail, not omitting anything or deliberately hiding anything. To her, the troublesome thing wasn't the matter of Zerd being red, but rather the awkwardness of being caught between the two major powers of the human race. She couldn't say for sure who was the one tricking who. The old powers were cunning, while the new powers were fierce. Neither of them were easy to get along with. This made a cultivator like her, who was unmoved, feel very uncomfortable. She really didn't want to get involved in this kind of boring internal strife. But now it seemed that it was very difficult to not get involved in this kind of muddy water. Liu Xiaoyi quietly listened until the end, but he didn't feel disappointed. It was impossible to get any useful information here. Everything would have to wait until they entered the winged heavens realm. They were talking to themselves now, so it was purely a guess. They were just following the procedure. Since that's the case, I'll have to trouble the few of you. I want to know about the opening and closing of the passage to the winged heavens realm. Seeing once is better than hearing 100 times. Even if it's just a story, we still have to go in and come out covered in bird feathers, right? Chapter 22:15. Lu Xiaoyi felt like he was on cloud nine under the flattery of the few Vanguard Star half-immortals. He had to make such a big fuss in order to make the conspiracy even fiercer. This was also the reason why he came here. This pointless confrontation was just a waste of time for him. It was meaningless. As for the few Vanguard Star half-immortals, he still couldn't see much from them. This wasn't something that could be seen clearly in a short period of time. For cultivators, they might not be able to understand it even if they looked at it for a lifetime. He enjoyed the flattery of the Vanguard Star half-immortals, the reception, all kinds of bewitching potions, and flattery for 3 full days. Before leaving the Immortal Palace, he received countless blessings of victory, success, and smooth sailing. It was as if this was simply an outing. It was as easy as turning over one's hand. Lu Xiaoyi didn't even need to fly. He was blown towards the wings spread heaven's passage. He was thinking, if he came back here one day, what kind of expression would these half-immortals have? The passage between the Vanguard Star domain and the wings spread heaven space wasn't a passage in a normal sense. It was actually an overlapping region. The region was fan-shaped. The wide part of the fan was located on the wings spread heaven side, and the narrow part was located on the human universe side. This made it possible to intercept them. If it wasn't for this kind of space restriction, it would undoubtedly be a fool's dream to stop the wings spread heaven's people in this vast space. This fan-shaped region was very big. The width of the fan was several billion miles. Only the end of the fan handle had a narrow exit that was tens of thousands of miles wide. This was also where the human cultivators had set up several defensive formations. Of course, they were long gone now. The wings spread heaven's space was a strange and huge space. It changed periodically with the tide of space. Every 10,000 years, the wings spread heaven's space and the main world space would overlap. In other words, the two spaces had the possibility of intersecting, so people simply thought that it was a passage. However, before the change of the era, the celestial phenomena in the universe were chaotic. Many of the operating mechanisms were damaged or leaked out. The overlapping of 10,000 years became an intermittent, small-scale overlapping with no fixed time and no fixed location. This provided a realistic possibility for small teams from both sides to pass through. Of course, this kind of irregular pattern was impossible to grasp and predict. You could only wait here if you acted quickly. Lu Xiaoyi came to this overlapping space, which was also the main battlefield between the humans and the winged men for hundreds of thousands of years. Standing here, although the void was vast, he could feel that thousands of soldiers and horses had once fought here. A place worth remembering forever. However, in less than a few thousand years, humans had already forgotten about this place, forgotten about the unyielding and glorious humans here. There were no signs of overlapping yet, but you never knew when it would come out, so you could only wait here so that you could enter as soon as possible. Lu Xiaoyi didn't stand in the air and wait like a statue. He found a treasure similar to a bed from his storage ring. He couldn't remember exactly who he had killed and picked it up as a spoil of war, but it was very suitable for the moment. If it wasn't for its function, he would definitely not stand if he could lie down. The wide bed was covered with a red satin quilt, and there was a round muslin cover on top. If there was a naked beauty inside, it would be a unique taste, but if there was a burly man inside, Lu Xiaoyi threw himself into the soft velvet quilt and reclined against the pillow, holding a jade scroll in his hand. He wasn't pretending, he was really reading Li Wuya's travel notes. Li Wuya had been here before, and together with another peerless villain, he had a series of unspeakable stories with a female cultivator from the Lavender sect. The woman was called Goodman. Lu Xiaoyi laughed as he watched with great interest. This Lavender sect was very interesting. Their name was very strange. In the past, they were the good people, but now they were the plain people. After the new era, they wouldn't become the evil people, would they? In another short memory, he also liked to watch such literary films, but he usually liked the genre next to Good Man, Unforgettable Memories. Simple happiness. He realized that happiness was really a mysterious thing. It wouldn't become easier with the increase of one's strength, because the stronger one's strength, the higher the threshold of happiness. In the end, one would find that it was still very difficult to obtain true happiness. Fools were the happiest. Then, she felt an aura approaching her. The good man slowly flew toward the battlefield of the past. Here, she had once fought an extremely difficult battle. Dozens of years of fierce battle changed her life, and the memory was still fresh in her mind. Then she saw the huge bed and the person on it. There was an indescribable sense of strangeness. She realized that the two of them seemed to have reversed their positions. She had a basic respect for this person who had been rumored to be a god in recent years, but she would never change her determination because of those rumors. She had seen many powerful half-immortals, but in the face of time, under the immortal court and surrounded by wolves, there were no heroes. This was the real cultivation world. A person's strength could be strong for a while, but it couldn't be strong for a lifetime, laughing very happily. What she couldn't understand was what kind of character could make a person who made people tremble in fear in the universe laugh and scrupulously like a child. He was also a sickly person, as if all talented people were like this. Didn't he know that this trip to the winged heavens might be a trip of death? The patient noticed her and greeted her casually, as if it was a matter of course to meet her here. "Fairy Sue, what is the matter for you to come here?" The good man's heart regained its calmness. Why should she blame others? If she didn't blame others in her heart, then she would be defeated. "I want to inform the enforcer that I also want to make a trip to the winged heavens and wish to travel together with the enforcer. I wonder if it's convenient?" Lu Xiaoyi sat up and kept the bed. His face was filled with curiosity, and his manner of speaking was finally normal. "This trip is indescribably dangerous, but it's not as simple as it seems on the surface. I personally don't mind, but Fairy, do you really know what it means to enter the winged heavens? It might mean that you'll be drawn into a whirlpool that you don't want to enter." The good man smiled coldly. Her extreme beauty made even the ferocious aura that had accumulated over hundreds of thousands of years on the battlefield disappear. "It's precisely because my fragrant clothes sect doesn't want to get involved that I must understand the whole story in detail, so that I can know what I should do to avoid it as much as possible. After the fragrant clothes sect reported the news about Zerg, we were already drawn into it. Wasn't that so?" Lu Xiaoyi smiled. "To me, you guys don't. But I can control myself. But I can't control others." Chapter 22:16. The two of them didn't have much to say to each other. Since they were strangers, it was very awkward for them to interact with each other. However, if Lu Xiaoyi didn't want to feel awkward, he would definitely find a way to do so. After all, he was a natural talker. "Husband, your sister Su Ren's elder, right?" Su Ren looked at him. She knew very well what the swordsman was trying to say. Of course, she had seen husband before. Not only that, he was also her most respected teacher and the person who guided her in cultivation. They had also interacted for thousands of years. The lavender sex rod had been handed to her by her lover. She had vowed to protect this sect that had raised her with her life. However, this didn't mean that she would easily hang the sect on some broken ship that was speeding away. In the last few thousand years, she had already fully grown up. Husband had also told her many secrets that would never be recorded in the ancient records and would only be hidden in her heart. Those were secrets that were difficult to speak of and couldn't be spoken of. Once they were spoken of, there was a possibility that it would bring about a disaster. There was a hurdle that couldn't be avoided. That person who was the first to bring the innate Tao to the lower realm. His actions might cause many people to scold him, but at the same time, there would also be many people who would support him. Whether it was right or wrong could only be left to the history of cultivation to judge. The universe was changing, and the era was changing. Su Ren originally thought that these earth-shattering events would be far away from her, and that she only needed to watch from afar. However, her master told her a story about his friendship with the greatest swordsman in history, the craziest subversive. Only then did she understand that the universe could be very big, but it could also be very small. It was so small that such a character was only one person away from her. And now, when she started to truly come into contact with this orthodoxy, she finally understood how much pressure one had to bear behind the glamour. The entire circle of half-immortals only dared to secretly scheme against others. None of them dared to use the most basic method of cultivation to directly challenge others. If this kind of pressure was placed on her, she reckoned that her heart would be moved or even tremble. However, this person in front of her had set up a huge bed in the void of the universe. He reclined on it and looked down on all living things. However, she still didn't think that she should be entangled with such a person. She was very clear about her position. She had to stand with the sun. Other than being burned to death, there was no other outcome. That's my master, but my master is an orthodox person. He rarely talks about private matters with me. Lu Xiaoyi was at a loss for words. He knew very well that the other party did not want to implicate Li Wuya in this matter. When he connected the dots with Xian Yuan, he realized that both parties had some history. He was very cautious. Since the other party was not willing, he would not force it. You can follow me. You can leave anytime. I won't ask you to do anything. Similarly, you can't ask me to do anything. I'm not responsible for anything that might happen along the way. Until now, Lu Xiaoyi was still unsure of this woman's intentions. Was she really thinking about the safety of the incense robe sect? Or was he using this as an excuse to spy on him? Was this part of the conspiracy? He wouldn't completely trust this woman just because the former Lavender sect leader had a relationship with Li Wuya. These were two different matters. As time passed, nothing would remain unchanged. Even if his lover was here, he would still have the same attitude, let alone a normal person. The woman nodded. Don't worry, enforcer. I won't interfere with your investigation. This is your right, not mine. I just want to take a closer look at the information reported by our incense robe sect. How much truth is there? Lu Xiaoyi smiled indifferently. When a storm comes, it won't care if you're innocent or not. The two finally returned to silence. In front of an experienced half-immortal Kuan cultivator, Lu Xiaoyi didn't continue with his flowery words. When it came to joking, it had to be based on the person and the situation. If the wrong person was at the wrong place, the original unfamiliarity would turn into annoyance. A person who was really good at talking would definitely know when to shut up. In this space, the two waited for close to 2 months. There were also 2 small, overlapping chances. However, one time, only Zhantian could pass through. The other time, it was a 2-way overlapping space. However, the time was short. It was so short that even with their half-immortal senses, they couldn't react to it. It wasn't until the 3rd time, when it was also a 2-way overlapping space, that they finally got the chance to pass through. One after the other, they quickly entered the overlapping space. They couldn't stay here for too long. Otherwise, if the space lost its effect, they wouldn't know where they would be sent to. There wouldn't be any danger to their lives, but it would take up too much time. The two didn't say a word as they rushed forward. Even if the woman raised her speed to the maximum, she could only barely keep up with the swordsman's shadow. This made her secretly shocked at how strong this person was. However, swordsman's specialty was speed. It was pardonable that she couldn't keep up with him in this aspect. In the next moment, they sensed an aura in front of them. It was obvious that the winged person was also rushing towards the origin world, just like them. However, the aura felt normal from afar. However, when it got closer, it started to become strange. That was because it was no longer a winged person, but a dead person. Just like that, he continued to fly. Along the way, people continued to die. He broke through the overlapping space and entered wings spreading heaven. She counted and found that a total of 11 winged people had died under the sword of this crazy sword cultivator. She frowned. In a sense, we're here to be messengers. Lu Xiaoyi nodded in agreement. Yes, from now on, we're messengers. We shouldn't cause too much trouble and kill too many people. However, this is only after we enter Yizhantian. Before that, I'm just an ordinary human. I have the right to pay my respects to those who were buried here. The woman was speechless for a moment. Madness wasn't the scariest thing. What was truly terrifying was the rationality under that madness. Lu Xiaoyi smiled, looking at the clear blue sky in front of him. His mood became much more cheerful. Towards beautiful women, he should be a little gentler. Before the new era truly arrives, before Tian and the origin world completely merge, the winged people and humans are still enemies, rivals. We can't make wild guesses and let down our guard just because of possible changes. What if Tian still exists after the new era? Do you think they'll give up on trying to infiltrate the origin world? The possibility of merging in the future is just a possibility. However, the merging also depends on who is merging with whom. It's not about whose feathers are prettier. It's about whose fist is bigger, who's fiercer. Any kind of compromise, the closer it is to the end, the crueler it gets. It's all about fighting for the initiative. Lu Xiaoyi didn't tell the complete truth. In fact, under his seemingly reasonable reasoning, he just didn't want the winged people to know that he had entered. He wanted to hide it for as long as he could. Even if he didn't care about the size of the winged people for his investigation, it was still a huge problem. Chapter 22:17. The sky here was truly blue and clear, without even a single cloud to be seen. In this kind of place, there was really no environment to borrow, and everything depended on one's strength. However, for a swordsman like him, this was not necessarily a bad thing. As long as it was open, he would be able to display his full potential. There was thin air between a vacuum and a layer of air. It was a very mysterious place. Lu Xiaoyi scratched his head. Sister Vegetarian, where should we go? Fairy Vegetarian sighed. You would never be able to reject a person who had a sweet mouth, especially if you did not dislike him too much. Look at this blue sky. There is not a single trace of color. However, if you look carefully, there are still some small areas with traces of dark blue and light blue changes. These are the traces left behind by the clouds passing by here. The movement of the clouds here is more fixed. You only need to look at the changes in color to roughly determine the direction. I cannot say that it is very accurate, but it is generally not bad. With Vegetarian leading the way, the two flew in the same direction while explaining. The last time the fragrant cloth sect disciples came to Wings, Spreading Skies, they flew from deep to shallow. It is very likely that they would encounter a dust nebula. That place is rich in blue sparkling cloud gauze and is also the main trade target of human cultivators. Enforcers want to target, just like how the winged people would be discriminated against and malice when they enter the main world. It is the same when humans come to Wings, Spreading Skies. Your every action will often become the basis for their judgment. There is no standard here. It is more purely based on their mood. Therefore, we cannot fly however we want, like in the void of the universe. For example, on this route, it is relatively safer, because this means that we are very likely to be merchants who are here to do business. In addition, our speed cannot be too fast. Our aura cannot be too strong, etc. I know that enforcers do not care about fighting, but the problem is that we are not here to fight. We have to be clear about our priorities, right? You call me sister, and I will do my best to help you. Of course, it is up to you whether you want to listen or not. There are some words that I will only say once. Lu Xiaoyi was very straightforward. Listen. Of course I want to listen. Actually, I also do not like to fight. Speaking of which, how long have we been in Wings, Spreading Skies? Why haven't I seen a single winged person? Serene smiled. Fortunately, this madman seemed to be obedient. If he was still as crazy as he was when he came in, she would not hesitate to abandon him. She only came here to find answers, not to court death. Winged people are social creatures, even more so than humans. There are still some humans who like to live alone, but there were almost none of them in the winged race. They placed a lot of emphasis on the concept of family. Every member of the family would never leave the family. Thus, if you saw a winged person fighting to the death with you in battle, you must have killed their family. Enforcer, I'm not against you killing the winged ones, but in this place, either you kill them all or you don't. There is no such thing as killing one of them would stun them and make the rest obedient. Since they are social creatures, they would naturally live together in a place close to the nebula. Furthermore, the space in Wings Spreading Skies is relatively large, equivalent to the space of 10 universes in the main world. It's not surprising that you haven't seen any winged ones for the time being. Lu Xiaoyi was very curious. Big Sister Surun, I see that you are very familiar with Wings Spreading Skies, so it's definitely not your first time here. Surun glanced at him. She knew what he meant by this question. You are a high-level half-immortal. You don't have much need for external things, so why did you come here? Although the danger of a half-immortal here was not very high, the winged ones also had half-immortals. Once they met, it would be hard to say. Why would they come here to stroll around and look at the scenery? It's for personal matters. Enforcer, you don't have to worry. It has nothing to do with Zerg. Lu Xiaoyi smiled awkwardly and explained, Big Sister Surun, please forgive me. I am a straightforward person. I don't have any other intentions. If you really suspect Big Sister, then just go on your own way. I just feel that if a godlike person like Big Sister came here, wouldn't it be especially dangerous? Surun understood what he meant very well. Relatively speaking, I have encountered more similar troubles in the human world. Don't think that the winged ones are all covered in hair, looking like both humans and beasts. The higher their realm, the more handsome they are. My appearance is nothing in Wings Spreading Skies. Wait until you really see the absolute beauty of the winged ones. Then you will understand what I mean. Lu Xiaoyi's eyes were filled with fantasy. There was such a thing? Why didn't he see it? Surun explained, Among the winged ones, there is a clear distinction between male and female. They are more in line with the survival philosophy of the ancient people, so you will rarely see female winged ones in battle. It is not because their realm is not strong enough, but because the pride of protecting the race falls on the male winged ones, so you have to be careful. Killing a female winged one is a very risky thing to do, and it will easily cause public anger. The two of them flew at a leisurely pace. Along the way, other than the blue sky, there was nothing else to see, but slowly, winged ones finally appeared in their field of vision. At first, it was a fleeting sight, but later on, there were people following them who did not know their true intentions. Because he could not fully utilize his advantage in speed, Lu Xiaoyi was a little troubled as he could not control the development of the situation. He could tolerate it for a while, but he could not tolerate it forever. No matter the race, there would always be people with bad tempers and unreasonable. Could it be that he would just be a coward forever? Dafa took out the Mingdi. Big Sister Surun, I have 2 ways to fly to that dust nebula without causing any trouble. Which one do you think is more suitable? One is this Mingdi, which was given to me by a winged one at the Immortal Palace Bazaar. If I take it out, will it have the effect of a pass? The other is to simply release the aura of a demigod. I think that no matter how brave these winged ones are, they won't really come looking for death, right? Surun took the Mingdi and looked at it. There was no problem with it, and she could not help but admire Lu Xiaoyi's communication skills. This was something that the winged ones would not easily give to others. She had interacted with the winged ones on Planet Bazaar for nearly 10,000 years, and she had never seen anyone give her one. Yet, this person had one on his first visit here. It made her suspect that there was a trick in this. Lu Xiaoyi looked at her expression and understood what she meant. Then, let's just release our aura and fly directly. I just feel that instead of hiding like this, we can't just keep doing this, right? If we meet someone who is provoking us, we will be exposed sooner or later. Why don't we just go straight to Dafa? We are here to investigate Zerg's traces, not to be spies. There's no need to be sneaky. Why don't we just reveal our identities and do things more straightforwardly? Chapter 22:18. When Lu Xiaoyi and the woman released their breaths and flew, the spies disappeared. They weren't afraid, but they couldn't keep up. The Celestial Fairy's way of doing things was full of her faction's characteristics of being kind to others and keeping the peace. The reason why Lu Xiaoyi agreed to follow her way of doing things at the beginning was just to see if she was flying so slowly because she was waiting for something. Could it be a trap? But after more than 10 days, he found that there was no trap. This was the character of Sister Surun. She was really plain. Since he already understood, he didn't want to waste his time with this woman. It was more important to finish the business as soon as possible. He wanted to attract the revenge of the old, half-immortal cultivators. He also wanted to know the position of Depeng in this matter. All of these didn't allow him to be too low-key. He needed to raise his flag and do things openly. At the very least, he was doing things for the heaven's eyes and for the entire human race. He couldn't be sneaky like a thief. Once they sped up, the troubles would naturally be far away. The ones that appeared nearby were all Air Force wings. Flying wings and a small number of heaven's wings posed a very limited threat to half-immortals like them. The realm of the winged men was different from that of humans. They had a bird body and cultivation, so it was very difficult for them to be on the same level as humans. Therefore, they had their own system. The winged men had the ability to fight from birth. Although it was very limited, the winged men, before they were 300 years old, called themselves Air Force wings. At this stage, they still mainly had the body of a bird and didn't develop the ability to use spells. They were still in their infancy, equivalent to the Gene Dan stage of humans. They couldn't leave the void. After 300 years old, the winged men had the ability to use spells. They began to make great progress in this aspect. Their fighting style became both physical and magical. At this stage, they called themselves flying wings. The flying wings were divided into different sizes. In fact, the small flying wings were the form of the early nascent soul stage, while the big flying wings were the mature form of the late nascent soul stage. They were the backbone of the winged men. When the winged men reach 1,000 years of age, a portion of them who have the most potential and the best perception will reach a higher level in their Dharma spells, becoming existences equivalent to our human perfected lords. At this level, whether it is body arts, divine abilities, Dharma spells, or secret arts, they will all reach the perfect realm in their lifetime. They are very terrifying existences. Ordinary human cultivators who are not good at fighting will not be a match for them. At this level, they were called sky wings. The heavenly wings were also divided into different sizes. The small heavenly wings were similar to the Yin spirit realm of the human primordial spirit realm. The great heavenly wings referred to the winged people in the Yang spirit realm. Apart from the fact that they did not have the ability to be reborn, their combat power was even slightly superior to that of the human Yang spirit realm. Were the half-immortal winged men called? Lu Xiaoyi asked curiously. Surin smiled. Wui. Hidden wings. Anything was fine. When the winged men become half-immortals, their wings will degenerate, and their entire body's characteristics will become exactly the same as humans. However, the winged men's innate divine ability still exists. I heard that they are very difficult to deal with. Every one of them has battle prowess equivalent to a human at the peak of half-immortals. However, because they are very few in number, they rarely show themselves in front of others. Lu Xiaoyi asked again, they don't have to stay in the inner and outer scenic skies? Surin nodded. That's right. Actually, in the myriad of worlds in the universe, there are many races that receive similar special treatment. However, due to special reasons and their small numbers, they don't attract the special attention of the heavenly axiom like humans. Lu Xiaoyi suddenly had a thought. Then, what should we do to make the winged men think that the two of us are the so-called hidden wings? Surin thought for a while, then said seriously, normal humans wouldn't do that. They wouldn't even think of it that way. Aura, smell, voice, habits, divine abilities, that kind of blood connection in the bones. It's just like how the winged men hide in a human group. You can tell at a glance. Of course, there's also the appearance. Forgive me for being blunt, but with your skin, enforcer, don't talk about hidden wings. Even Air Force wings would be difficult for you. These words dealt a heavy blow to Lu Xiaoyi. Surin was quite satisfied, so he didn't hesitate to explain more. If we must talk about the differences, let's not talk about the internal differences. Just from the appearance, their hair is thicker and shinier than that of normal humans. The rain can't get wet, and the cold can't invade because their hair is hollow. It's precisely because their hair is hollow that it has a special effect in isolating the opponent's divine sense from locking onto them. For example, Enforcer's flying sword can easily cover the sky wings. However, if you're dealing with hidden wings, there's a possibility that you'll miss the target. Lu Xiaoyi was enlightened. Every race had their own abilities. The universe was vast and full of wonders. There were still many things to learn. A month later, they discovered the first dust nebula. The dust nebula was like the stars in the void of the main world in the winged skies. It was the place where the winged men gathered. Here, they didn't need to flap their wings to float in the nebula, just like humans. This was a huge nebula. However, according to Serene, it was only a medium-sized nebula in the winged skies. It was similar to the stars in the void of the main world, except that it changed from a solid state to a gaseous state. With a sweep of divine sense, there were thousands of auras in the nebula. Most of them were very weak. Presumably, they were the Air Force wings and flying wings mentioned by Serene. There were also sky wings, but there weren't many of them. However, they didn't find any more powerful existences. This is a family? Serene explained, there are several families. However, humans don't understand the division between the winged men's families. It doesn't seem to be anything special. They never announced their family's name to the outside world. They call themselves the winged men. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. It's normal. Even in the human world, if he doesn't say it himself, who knows if he's an ancestor or a grandson? Things like bloodlines are too complicated. Because they were already close to the nebula, they couldn't help but slow down. They were completely exposed to the constantly patrolling winged men outside the nebula. The reason why they didn't get close was because the auras of these two humans were too powerful. They didn't dare to act rashly. However, more than 10 great sky wings rushed out of the nebula very quickly, and the number was still increasing. Clearly, they had already sensed that these two humans weren't just here to trade for the blue sparkling cloud gauze. Lu Xiaoyi and Su Ren looked at each other. Su Ren sighed and knowingly retreated behind him, leaving the initiative to the other party. From now on, whether they fought or negotiated was no longer up to her. More than 10 great sky wings surrounded them, forming a natural encirclement. This was a habit they had developed from hunting humans for a long time. Among them, a great sky wing with a head full of white hair stepped out. What business do the two of you have here? Lu Xiaoyi put on a straight face. Under the orders of Heaven's Eye, we're here to investigate the winged skies nebula and search for Zerg. Call out all your people, or else I'm afraid something will happen. Chapter 2219. The white-furred winged man flapped his wings. Wings spreading sky. When did humans become the masters here? Lu Xiaoyi did not hold back. Beneath the three realms, all earth cultivators. Within the 5 elements, there is no escape from karma. Zerg wreaks havoc and does not respect living beings. How can wings spreading sky be spared? Humans are not the masters here, but all living beings in the universe. Humans, demon beasts, spirit treasures. Why are you winged man so special? The winged man was still unyielding. The winged man can solve wings spreading skies problem. Lu Xiaoyi shouted, arrogant. You think you can solve it just because you say so? The origin world's myriad realms and various spaces. As long as there are living beings, we will search everywhere. This is not to challenge the dignity of a race, but to ensure that nothing goes wrong. You already said that there is no such thing in your own space, so why are you still searching? What are you trying to hide in this area? Or is it because of your pitiful self-esteem? If you want to integrate into the origin world, you have to follow its rules. You can't aspire to be a small kingdom here. The winged man shouted angrily. Wings spreading sky cannot have Zerg's nest. They might have come into contact with one, but it is impossible for them to provide the soil for the red. Lu Xiaoyi disdainfully said, you can make the decision? If Zerg had taken root in wings spreading sky, would the million winged men dare to vouch for Zerg? The winged man's feathers fluttered even though there was no wind. He was furious, but he did not dare to reply. Lu Xiaoyi pointed at him, then at the other winged men. Every star in the universe, every space, will be forced to undergo inspection. If you are unwilling, I will kill you all, but the inspection will still be carried out. Find hidden wings, and no matter what the result is, wings spreading sky cannot escape inspection. The tens of thousands of half-immortals in the origin world have been waiting for this opportunity. And you want to show me your strength of character? The human domain did not refuse. The spirit treasure space cooperated, and the phoenix and rocks opened their nests. You winged men think you are a special case in the universe? Listen up. If you want to learn about human civilization, you have to learn it thoroughly. Strength of character is only a part of it. More important than strength of character is self-knowledge. I'll give you 15 minutes. If you don't come out, I'll treat you as Zerg's accomplice. He wants to spread the universe and destroy the foundation of the new era. The people beside him shook their heads. This was a blatant accusation, using the survival of their race to threaten the winged race. For hundreds of thousands of years, the winged race had never lowered their heads in the face of such threats. This swordsman must be crazy to use such a simple and old-fashioned method to solve the problem. It was simply aggravating the conflict. She wanted to warn him, but due to what she had said before, it was not convenient for her to interrupt, so she could only prepare in secret. Although the realms of these winged ones were not high, their large numbers were still very troublesome, especially when there were 100 or so skywings among them. They were not ants that could be easily squashed. However, her worries were unnecessary. She, who had always boasted that she had a deep understanding of the winged ones, was surprised to find that after the dozen or so great wings discussed among themselves, they no longer answered, their eyes filled with humiliation and hatred. Nevertheless, a large number of winged ones began to fly out of the dust nebula one after another. This was definitely not for battle, because this included the majority of the flight wings and Air Force wings. Obviously, their decision was to comply. What's going on? Did the winged ones have a change of character? The winged ones were very organized and obedient. In just a short moment, thousands of them had already filed out, and not a single one was left in the nebula. Lu Xiaoyi did not say much. He opened his mind ball, and a flash of sword light shot out. In an instant, millions of sword lights covered the sky, almost covering half the sky. The sword tide was surging and boundless, plowing straight into the nebula. Every sword light maintained the exact same distance from each other, vibrating and resonating with each other, forming a sword wave force field that had no blind spots, not even letting go of the tiniest dust particles. It was like a torrential downpour, washing the entire nebula space. In just a few dozen breaths, the entire dust nebula had been plowed through, and not a speck of dust escaped inspection. Truth be told, such an inspection was a little excessive. Even in the origin world, there was no inspection like this. Others would do a rough inspection, but this was a full-body inspection, not even sparing a single pore. It was a bit of a fuss, but this was the first time. What was important was not the method, but the attitude it represented. Absolutely intolerable. Very good. There is no sign of Zerg ovulating here. You are right. At least this nebula is clean and has nothing to do with Zerg. I apologize for what I said earlier. Lu Xiaoyi apologized as if he was drinking water or giving a slap to the other party's face after giving them a slap. Anyway, he had taken advantage of them, so saying a few words would make him look more open-minded. Looking at the indignant winged ones, he released his divine sense and raised his voice. The change of the era, the shattering of space, and the integration of winged ones and the origin world is highly probable. You know it very well, and so do the origin world's self-cultivators. Since you have been looking forward to this day, at least in your mind, you should not be singled out. You should treat yourself as a member of the universe's self-cultivators, and not as an outsider. If you treat yourself as an outsider, of course, we will treat you as an outsider too. Everyone should follow the principle, and that is the principle of integration. It is also the reason why the origin world only sent me here, and not an army of cultivators. The reason why Zerg is in this state is because they always want to challenge the rules and trample on the bottom line. The origin world's self-cultivators can accept hundreds of rivers into the sea, but they can also choose not to drink. The choice is not up to us, but to you. He slowly flew out and said casually, "Go and inform the higher-ups of the winged ones of my intentions. I will be honest. I have a bad temper. This kind of routine inspection will make me angry sooner or later, and I won't be so easy to talk to. If I meet someone who doesn't have eyes and wants to play with my integrity, I will first annihilate his entire family. His death will be in vain." Sky eyes Lu Xiaoyi, official position of enforcer. "I have the power to kill the universe's detritus. If you want to die, I will grant you your wish." The ordinary people followed behind the swordsman. They were trembling in fear and on tenterhooks. The elemental energy in their bodies surged as they prepared to deal with the winged one's crazy attacks at any time. This guy had just put a label on someone, and now he was bragging about how he had the power to kill the universe's detritus? This bragging was a little too big, and he really dared to say it. However, it was probably true that he did not have the power to kill the deities. The Sky's mission was carried out by the deities who assigned a mission. With the millions of years of Sky Eye's destiny, it was accumulated bit by bit to maintain the harmony of the universe. Even if they annihilated the winged ones, it was really nothing. However, that was an organization, and not a madman who had lived for thousands of years and talked to himself. She guessed wrong again. The winged ones did not make any movements from the beginning to the end. They only watched the two of them leave from afar, and did not even send anyone to follow them. Then, what did I overlook? The ordinary people asked themselves. Chapter 22:20. Sister Su Run, if we go down from here, how long will it take to reach the nebula where the insect tracks were found? Lu Xiaoyi had returned to normal. He had changed from calling people lousy to sister. About 10 more nebulas? Maybe 7 or 8? Su Rin was a little distracted. Noticing her abnormality, Lu Xiaoyi understood that this was because she had been stuck in the exterior realm for too long and did not pay enough attention to the changes in the outside world. This was also the reason why the Eight Winds Motionless sect was so worried about the orthodoxy in the Frontier Star. A cultivator, like her, was not suitable to go out and make waves. She should just stay in the sect and observe the changes. There were many cultivators like her in the cultivation world. They only cultivated according to their own pace and were extremely slow to the changes in the outside world. Even if the 36 innate great Taoists collapsed, they would not have any improper thoughts. This could be a rare kind of determination, but it could also be the extreme of not wanting to improve. It varied from person to person. Following one's heart was also a kind of attitude. He still had to explain. After all, taking the risk to travel with him was in itself a kind of courage. Mentality, it's a very subtle thing, not only for humans, but also for all cultivation creatures. When creatures are in despair, they often become the most tenacious fighters. No hardship can crush them, no blow can knock them down, and any setback will only make them braver and stronger, no matter what kind of race they are originally. To destroy them, you can't use force. The best way is to give them hope. Just like the change of the era and the fusion of the wing-spreading sky and the main world, who spread this bullsh asterisk news. No one knows. The change of the era does not mean that all the space barriers in the universe will be broken. It's just a part of it. But there must be someone secretly spreading the news. When everyone says that the wing-spreading sky and the main world will merge in the new era, even if it's fake, it will become true. There is only one purpose, and that is to give the winged people hope. Lu Xiaoyi smiled enigmatically. When there's hope, there's also fear. With a way out, of course, they will not risk their lives. In any case, it was only a few thousand years, perhaps even shorter. To the winged race, who had a relatively long lifespan, it was nothing much. Why would they fight to the death for something that could be obtained just by waiting quietly? Once this chi was released, The winged men were no longer the winged men of the past. In the two universe wars of the Fifth Ring, the winged race's performance had deteriorated over and over again. It wasn't that their strength had decreased, but rather that they lacked the determination to face death. That's why I'm scolding them now. Not because I'm brave, but because I know how to pick the right time. If I were here a few thousand years ago, I would definitely be smiling more beautifully than flowers, and my words sweeter than honey. Serene looked pensive. Who's the one behind all this? This person was truly far-sighted and had a long-term plan. But it could also be because everyone was spreading false information and did not know much about the specific changes in the new era. However, I have long heard that the negative space will merge with the main world. The Heaven's Choice continent would eventually collapse, eventually shattering into countless stars of various sizes, scattering in the boundless void of the origin world. Who was the one who spread these words? Was it true, or was there an ulterior motive? In the end, the wings spreading heavens was the same as the negative space, and everyone took the merging as a natural change. Lu Xiaoyi felt his face burning. He felt somewhat ashamed, because the rumor that the negative space would merge with the main world was made up by him to deceive the ancient beasts. In the end, not only did the negative space cause a huge change in the Heaven's Choice continent, it even affected the wings spreading heavens. Su Run had overestimated him. To be honest, it was just a joke to deceive people. He really did not expect that it would cause the wings spreading heavens. He could only change the topic. For a race like the winged men, they might not be naturally warlike, but they were forced to be warlike by the environment. Once they are relieved, there will be no limit to compromise. In terms of the art of negotiation, treating them gently will have the opposite effect. Instead, it will make them arrogant, thinking that everything they have is what they have fought for over hundreds of thousands of years. The origin world's humans have no choice but to acknowledge their status. Once their arrogance is born, there will be countless incidents in the future, and the unlucky ones will be us humans. We must let them know that humans have the intention to exterminate the winged men. At the very least, they must have the desire to continue fighting. Only by showing the attitude of constantly finding fault with them and taking the opportunity to exterminate them will they become honest for the sake of their own race's safety and truly accept the restrictions of the human world's rules. After a few more generations, this kind of natural restriction will become their instinct, and the winged men will truly integrate into the main world, becoming a member of the universe's cultivation family. So when I say that they are asking for a beating, it is not because I am bloodthirsty and cold-blooded. What you all are thinking about is this mission, but what I am thinking about is the future of the entire universe. Lu Xiaoyi's eloquent bragging made Su Run, a fourth blight cultivator, unable to make sense of it. She had to admit that what he said was very reasonable, but she kept feeling that something was wrong. She felt that she could not keep up with the rhythm. Everyone said that Inspector Lu's flying sword was unparalleled, but looking at it now, what was truly unparalleled was his tongue. You said to let them find the half-immortal hidden wings. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. I'm not trying to scare them. This is the truth. The space of wings spreading sky is too huge, far beyond my imagination, and there is no way to find them through the nebulas. Just like in the main world, which one of the half-immortals investigate the various airspace. The only effective method is to mobilize the cultivation masses. We only do the key investigations. As an official, the key is not how capable you are, but how you make your subordinates do their best. Lu Xiaoyi laughed coldly. Those hidden wings, since they're used to tyrannical abuse here, of course there will be times when they have to bear the responsibility. Whether Zerg takes root in wings spreading sky is the winged men's own business. Why should I help them run errands? Sister, we are here to wield whips, not to do manual labor. Su Rin sighed. But those hidden wings, if you continue to pressure them like last time, I'm afraid there won't be a good ending. Lu Xiaoyi laughed. Of course, they will not give in easily. This is the pride of a half-immortal. So I'm afraid there will be a battle coming up. I have never protected others in battle, because this is irresponsible to both of us. So, you should consider whether to leave temporarily. After all, this matter has nothing to do with you. Serene did not hesitate. I will not leave, because I want to know the entire matter from start to finish. I want to give an explanation to the news reported by Lavender Sect. Only by giving a clear explanation will Lavender Sect not become a sacrificial lamb in the circle. Chapter 22-21. In the next few months, the two investigated two more nebulas, but they still found nothing. However, the atmosphere became more tense. There were always black sheep, and Chinibi youths. The nebula had almost been slaughtered. Not only Su Run, but also Lu Xiaoyi broke out in cold sweat. Walking on a tightrope here, one careless mistake could lead to a split, and no one would end up well. The two had no choice but to slow down. It was a little awkward to say that two half-immortals slowed down in front of a group of winged person cultivators. However, Lu Xiaoyi did not feel embarrassed at all. It was as if he did not have any nerves in this aspect, and was even immensely pleased with himself. Sister Su, look, it's like gambling. Even if you catch a bad hand, you have to pretend that it's a straight hand. This is life, this is cultivation. Always guessing the opponent's size and betting on your own size. Whoever reveals their bottom line first will be unlucky. Whoever can't hold it in first will lose. I dare to bet with you that our every move will be watched by the hidden wings. They are waiting for the best time to flip the cards. Surun was very confused. Shouldn't they be the first to find us to avoid an irreversible tragedy? The hidden wings would not be watching directly, or else a half-immortal would be able to sense it immediately. However, among the winged person's magical powers, there was a magical power called Global Eagle. It allowed the lower-level winged person to see the higher-level winged person through a special connection. It was equivalent to the higher-level winged person spying on them, but what you could sense were the heavenly wings that were everywhere and occasionally appearing. Lu Xiaoyi's eyes flashed fiercely. No, they will not appear immediately. The time they are waiting for is after we impulsively slaughter the winged person, or during the process. They will use this to gain the moral high ground. Sura did not believe it. That's impossible. We are all their clansmen. Not only will they not save us, but they will also deliberately allow us to slaughter them, just to gain a bargaining chip. Lu Xiaoyi snorted. Why is it impossible? Since ancient times, have you ever seen a high-level existence that really cares about ants at the bottom of the hierarchy? If they really care, they will not become a ruler. This is a cruel class that needs to be devoid of humanity, unless cultivation disappears and becomes another form of civilization. In the eyes of these top-notch hidden wings, the winged ones below them were merely numbers. You don't have to blame the winged men. Humans are even worse than them. Therefore, they would understand it this way. If they could rely on sacrificing the lives of some insignificant clansmen in exchange for an advantageous position in the negotiations, and then obtain greater benefits for the winged race, wouldn't such a sacrifice be very meaningful? You see how great. That's why they won't appear unless we kill them. Surin looked at him and felt a chill in her heart. If all of this was true, and the winged race was really so cruel and heartless that they abandoned their own people, then what about this person who could see through their intentions with a single glance? How could it be? As if he had guessed the woman's thoughts, Lu Xiaoyi was flattering himself. I'm different. I'm the son of the lowest class. So what if you're the grandson of the lowest rung of society? Before you become successful, everyone is the descendant of the lowest class. It's just that when the world is truly developed, cultivators will always find something in the past that can prove that they are different from the rest. Auspicious signs will descend from the heavens, and golden springs will surge from the earth. In my previous life, I was also rich, and used this to prove that I was born noble. Lu Xiaoyi's heart skipped a beat. What did he realize? But it was still a little vague. Although it was just a casual sentence from Su Run, he heard some kind of wisdom from it. Senior Sister's reincarnation was very subversive, but there seemed to be something missing from it. There was some inexplicable, profound truth, but now, through Su Ren's words, he somewhat understood. He still needed to think carefully, but he couldn't care less now. Sister Su, you don't understand. In the cultivation world, this kind of situation is destined to be unchangeable, but without cultivation, everyone would be ordinary people. Forget it. Why am I telling you this? Su Ren didn't probe further. She was very confused about the current situation. It's obvious that we can outlast them. They have all the time and can keep waiting, but we can't. It's just a few nebulas, and we almost killed them. In the future, this kind of situation will become more and more frequent. If someone instigates us behind the scenes, Lu Xiaoyi said seriously, Sister Su, I found that in every nebula, there's an existence similar to a shrine. Not only do they worship the heroes of the Winged Men clan, but there's also a list of outstanding achievements of the predecessors who killed humans. I want to ask if there's a nebula in the nearby space that's more outstanding in this aspect. Su Ren immediately understood what he meant. You want to Lu Xiaoyi nodded. Since we can't avoid it, we might as well take the initiative and choose a nebula ourselves. I saw that the previous nebulas were very different in this aspect. Some of them didn't seem to have participated in many battles, and some of them had extraordinary achievements. If we must kill, we should at least kill someone who's worth it, right? Su Ren silently turned around. It seemed that she was indeed very familiar with the Winged Men clan. She should have been here more than once. Lu Xiaoyi originally thought that she was just a burden, but he didn't expect that after entering the Winged Men clan, he would have to rely on her a lot. He felt ashamed, so he naturally called her sweeter. Before the real battle began, it was better to send this sister, Su Ren, away. With her personality and experience, she would be at a disadvantage if they really fought. Originally, humans were slightly weaker than the Winged Men in the same realm, let alone a self-disciplined cultivator like her. Not only in terms of hard power, but also in terms of soft power. In terms of experience, viciousness, shamelessness, and unscrupulous means to achieve goals, she would be at a disadvantage if she was too far behind. Thinking of this, in less than 10 days, he saw a fiery red nebula in the distance. It was much smaller than the ones he saw before. Along the way, the Su Ren who led the way purposely took a detour. Lu Xiaoyi understood that she didn't want to provoke those irrelevant nebulas and was afraid that he would kill them. She had good intentions, so he deliberately pretended not to know. Su Ren pointed at the nebula and said in a cold voice. It was obvious that she was suppressing her anger. Inspector, don't think that this nebula is small and there aren't many winged men in it. Every winged man here is a tyrannical person whose hands are stained with the blood of humans. In the winged sky, some winged clan members had their families destroyed, some had their entire clan wiped out in the war with the humans, and some were simply warmongers, full of hostility towards the humans. They had gathered here for various reasons, but they all had the same belief: to counterattack the origin world and slaughter without end. Every time there was a war between humans and winged men, the winged men in this fiery red nebula would always be at the front line. They abandoned their families and tribes, and have completely become war machines. There are a few more such fiery red nebulas in the Winged Men clan, and this one is just the nearest one. In my opinion, if you must take action, they're the best targets. Chapter 22:22. Lu Xiaoyi was very satisfied, very satisfied. Fairy Su Ren was very sensible. She had arranged for those warmongers who were unable to walk out from the shadows of war. Perhaps they were also the backbone of the winged men. These people were the most dangerous existences. They would spoil everything when they faced each other. If they hurt others, they would also hurt themselves. To humans, they were the best targets for annihilation. Sister Su, I'll go alone. Can you help me intercept those who slip through the net from afar? Since these winged men are true warmongers, their combat experience should not be lacking. I can't guarantee that I can catch all of them in one go. Su Ren knew what he really meant. He did not want her to be involved in this. This was very awkward. They had come together, but they could not advance and retreat together. However, she had to admit that this suggestion took into account their reputation. It was indeed the best way to wipe out the enemy. For people like these, if they wanted to kill, they had to kill them all. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble. Lu Xiaoyi played it down. If the hidden wings came alone after I made my move, they might not gang up on me in order to save face. If there were two of us, they would have a reason to gang up on me, Serene snorted. Although she could understand the swordsman's feelings of not wanting her to be in danger, being looked down upon like this still made her feel uncomfortable. It was still an irrefutable reason. It reflected the swordsman's meticulous style, which was completely different from his external appearance. No matter how crazy or rude he was, when it came to taking care of her, the swordsman had shown full of gentleness. He treated his friends with gentleness and dared to pierce through the sky when facing enemies. This was the impression that Xian Yuan had left on the world. Especially since Li Wuya, this style became more and more obvious. Swordsman was the most hated orthodoxy in the universe's cultivation world. However, there were also the friends that cultivators were most willing to make in private. If you had a real swordsman as a friend, it meant that you had a real shoulder to lean on. Humans were just that complicated and contradictory. She didn't want to be a pure spectator. Moreover, with her understanding of the winged men, she couldn't completely stay out of this. Once the fight had turned red, no matter how rational a person was, they would be swayed by their emotions. Unless they withdrew from wings spanning heavens, they wouldn't be truly safe. Lu Xiaoyi slowly approached this small red nebula. With the help of his powerful divine sense, the situation inside the nebula became clear at a glance. The red color was due to the special mineral dust in it. In addition, the winged ones here had intentionally or unintentionally embellished it, as if to show that they were different from the rest. It seemed even more ferocious and aggressive. The number of auras within the nebula was relatively small. Unlike the nebulas he had encountered before, which had at least thousands or even tens of thousands of winged ones, there were only about 1,000 winged ones here. However, even though the number was small, the quality was very different. There were basically no Air Force wings here. 60 to 70% of them were flight wings, while 30 to 40% were sky wings. Just in terms of strength alone, they were far more powerful than the few large nebulas he had encountered before. However, to him, this didn't mean much. The current him could easily kill even the most powerful demi-immortal peak. He had mastered close to 20 Tao states, which allowed his flying sword to be the most effective against almost any orthodoxy. After the ability of Tao state exceeded a certain limit, it would slowly display its power and become more and more obvious. This was the deeper reason why one's swordsmanship had improved by leaps and bounds by cultivating Tao state instead of swordsmanship. On this point, his path was completely different from Li Wuya's. Before he could get close, dozens of winged ones had already flown out. Their expressions were different, but there was one thing in common. Their eyes revealed the ferocity of discovering prey. If it wasn't for the difference in their realms, they probably wouldn't even bother to talk to him and would just tear him apart. They were ruthless, but Lu Xiaoyi was even more ruthless than them. He directly said ruthlessly, "The heaven's eye of the main world is here to search for the remnants of Zerg. Leave the nebula within 15 minutes. Don't leave behind any personal belongings. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that everything will be the same after the search." How could they listen to such a rude provocation? One of the winged ones roared, and dozens of them instantly formed a battle formation and circled down. At the same time, a large number of winged ones in the red nebula began to move. The winged ones were rude and unreasonable, but they weren't stupid. They knew that the only way to kill a human demi-immortal was through numbers and sacrifice. They weren't afraid of death. Seeing that the winged ones didn't even have the most basic manners and were even more direct than him, Lu Xiaoyi was very satisfied. This was how it should be. What was there to talk about? Communication without a common language was a waste of time. It was best to use his fist directly. As soon as he opened his head, the sword river surged out. In the blink of an eye, 7 or 8 winged ones had already fallen under his sword. There was a convenient thing about killing a race like the winged ones. It was that he didn't have to search for their past or future. He only had to deal with their stronger present. How could his opponents in the present world be stronger than him? What really troubled him was actually the superb concealment techniques of the orthodox Taoists and Buddhists. The winged ones were his favorite opponents. He didn't move because the situation wasn't suitable. The sword river swept past, taking away the lives of the winged ones. Blood mixed with bird feathers in the sky, making for an exceptionally cold scene. This immediately made the winged ones go crazy. They couldn't bear to see blood. Whether it was their own blood or the blood of their enemies, it would only make them even crazier. Otherwise, they wouldn't be worthy of being called the berserkers of the winged ones. Wave after wave of winged ones surrounded the motionless, infuriating human and began to launch a deadly assault. They were indeed the battle maniacs of the winged ones. There were nearly 1,000 winged ones in the nebula, and none of them retreated. Even the Yuanying winged ones were using their lives to open up a path of death in the Sword River. This strategy wasn't completely useless. Although there were still winged ones falling under the sword from time to time, it was no longer like when 7 or 8 winged ones were killed at the same time at the beginning of the battle. A three-dimensional sphere with no blind spots attacked from all directions, splitting the power of the Sword River. This made it difficult for the swordsmen to gather their swords to kill while protecting their inner circle. This was the correct use of numbers. The winged people were very proficient in this, but there was a prerequisite. Everyone had to be unafraid of death. Once there were those who did not put in effort, those who would rather die than themselves, such a method would be a joke. But the berserkers of the winged ones weren't afraid of death. That was what they said, and that was what they did. This was a strange scene. To put it simply, it was like a big ball encircling a small ball. The small ball was formed by millions of surging sword lights. They surged tirelessly according to a special pattern, like a layer of flowing water, blocking any attack from any angle or direction. The big ball was made up of nearly 1,000 winged ones. It was a little messy, but as they rose and fell, they were all attacking the small ball with no regard for their own safety. They were like seagulls circling, looking for opportunities, diving, and then bouncing back covered in wounds. Chapter 22-23. Within the wings, spreading heavens, there were 5 silhouettes faintly flashing past. They were still a little far from the battlefield and still needed a few dozen breaths of time. However, everyone had a bad premonition in their hearts. These idiots, do they think they can achieve their goal by surrounding the most outstanding swordsman of the origin world? That's just baiting them. This swordsman wants to slaughter the cloud. A voice said hatefully. He was called the Armored Man, one of the 5 strongest winged men demigods. At the level of the hidden wings, they already existed completely in human form. On the surface, there was no difference. They also had their own Taoist names, just like humans. However, the winged ones liked to use humans as the root symbol for their Taoist names. For example, he was called Armored Man, while his companions were called Bramble Man, Ordinary Man, Superior Man. Perhaps it was a resentment towards becoming a real human, which gave them such a weird way of naming their Taoist names. It was not strange. The Superior Man was very calm. It's not too late. There are hundreds of heavenly wings there, and even dozens of great heavenly wings. It's not something that can be dealt with in a few dozen breaths of time. The Bramble Man snorted. I told you to look for him directly. You just had to toy with him, using the glorified name of creating karma for him. Humph, to the swordsman, when have they ever been soft-hearted because they were afraid of killing? These people are the most loyal warriors of the winged men. It's a pity that they died in the hands of the sword lunatic. The information of the Ordinary Man was not accurate. In fact, in the wing-spread sky, there were not many elite red nebulas like this. There were only a few of them, and they were considered the special elites of the winged men. They were the backbone of the winged men's forces, and they were not people that could be casually abandoned. The armored man defended himself. Who knew that this person would be able to find this place when he first came to the wing-spread sky? This was not on the route they had planned to take. There must be someone guiding him. Fifth sister, this can't be the work of your human friend. If the losses are really heavy, you have to give us an explanation. A gentle female voice rang out from the five. Even though she was wearing a veil, her voice had a strange charm that made people's imagination run wild. Third senior brother is really keeping up with the times. He hasn't even integrated into the origin world, but his habits are already no different from that of a human. He's very skilled in shifting the blame and framing others. Masterin shouted, "The enemy is right in front of us. How can we throw ourselves into confusion and blame each other?" Waiting for the swordsman to make the first move was everyone's decision, and it shouldn't be anyone's responsibility. Fifth younger sister's friend was her friend, and she was her. How could they be lumped together? If they had the time to bicker, they might as well think about how they should deal with the swordsman if they really met him. This person's battle prowess is unparalleled. He is invincible among the half-immortals of the origin world. He is very famous. Don't treat him as an ordinary human half-immortal. Otherwise, you will definitely suffer losses. He was the eldest senior brother, and he was a fair person. What he was best at was being impartial and giving both sides 50 strikes. Since he had spoken, everyone stopped arguing and hoped that they would be able to make it in time. Would he make it in time? Definitely not. When Lu Xiaoyi finished digging the hole, very few people could jump out in one piece. That was because he was very good at digging holes and burying people. Since he had already dug a hole, how could he allow them to climb out? Sensing that all the winged ones in the red nebula had gathered around him, he began to bury them. The Sword River, which was originally based purely on elemental energy, began to show its unpredictable side. The five elements were the first to change. The Sword River was no longer in a defensive formation. Instead, it was shot out. While he was twitching, he was hidden in the millions of sword lights. No one knew which sword light was his real body. Since the impermanence changes took place, the will of slaughter suddenly descended. Wrapped in the Sword River, the Tao vanishing heavenly phenomenon was like a spring breeze blowing through the grassland. Countless dandelion seeds rose up in large swathes. It was a magnificent sight. The great void dispersal force and the yin and yang transformations. The Sword River seemed to have become a devouring black hole. Those who had escaped the previous wave of killing could not escape the next wave of devouring. Space began to fold, and the remaining great wings who wanted to temporarily escape had nowhere to run. Then, inexplicably, countless bolts of lightning struck down, combining with the sword lights to reap lives. By the time the few strongest great divine wings looked around, the once incomparably powerful Berserker Legion was no more. And now, they were directly facing the swordsman, and the outcome could be imagined. From afar, Su Ren watched this feast of slaughter. She had once said that if they were going to kill, they should kill them all. This was just a beautiful wish, and of course, it was impossible. Without mentioning anything else, just the dozens of great wings were all at the peak of the Yang soul. They were actually on the same level as the so-called half-immortal freaks of the inner and outer scenic skies. So how could they be wiped out? If there was enough time, she believed that these winged ones would all die under the swordsman's sword, but she could already feel several auras rapidly approaching from afar. If there was not enough time, killing the small ones and leaving the big ones behind was the only choice. However, she had guessed wrong again. They were originally in a stalemate, but when all the winged ones arrived, the swordsman showed his appetite. Continuous, perfectly connected, completely different, and even a Tao realm rotation that she had never heard of instantly broke the winged one's defenses. They had just adjusted themselves to this Tao realm, and in the blink of an eye, they had to adapt to a completely different Tao realm. If they could keep up, they still had a chance to live, but if they could not, they would immediately die. Millions of sword lights could be used to switch between Tao realms so quickly without any flaw or leeway. She had never even heard of such a thing, let alone seen it. How many times did he switch Dao realms? It should be 8 times? However, there were 2 that she had never heard of, which should be the swordsman's new killing moves. One could swallow people like a whole, and the other could attract lightning. As expected of the swordsman, the Dao realms that he cultivated were all used to kill people, and their power was indeed extraordinary. However, this was something that could be used in battle. To truly become an innate Dao, there were more important things that she did not think highly of, because it was somewhat against the harmony of the heavens. Close to 1,000 winged one's berserkers flew out of the nebula and surrounded the swordsman in less than 100 breaths, but the swordsman started killing people in less than 10 breaths. Originally, she thought that before Hidden Wing's arrival, it was already a huge hurdle for a sword cultivator to be able to kill half of the enemies. Now, it seemed like her understanding of the sword cultivator was constantly changing and constantly improving, but she still could not catch up to his true abilities. It was like a bottomless pit. Now, she finally understood why the swordsman dared to ignore the hidden wings, and why he dared to ignore the possible traps set by the old demigods in the inner and western scenic skies. There was nothing special about it. It was just his own abnormal strength. It was the simplest, but also the most difficult to deal with. Because no matter how intricate a scheme was, the only way to solve the problem in the end was through strength. At the same time, she also knew that she was now faced with a very important choice. With the abilities that the swordsman had displayed, the Hidden Wings would probably not fight him fairly. So should she join in? Chapter 22-24. Lu Xiaoyi had long sensed the approach of the 5 auras, but he did not care. In fact, he was now in a state of review of his previous battle. This was his habit, a very good habit. The crux of his review was whether he would be able to kill faster if he used Li Wuya's Golden Origin. The Golden Origin represented the highest achievement of Li Wuya's half-immortal AoE swordsmanship. Of course, the swordsmanship after becoming an immortal was an entirely different matter. To a cultivator, the most awkward situation was that one could dominate the world with a single move. Holding on to one or more swordsmanship as a trump card was a type of thinking that did not think about improving. Always improving, always improving. When the improvement was no longer enough to keep up with one's own understanding of Dao, even the best swordsmanship would be abandoned. He did not know whether Li Wuya had abandoned the Golden Origin after becoming an immortal, but to him now, the Golden Origin was still the standard to measure his AoE swordsmanship. He had once experienced the power of the Golden Origin in the Heaven's Volition Sword Dao steel. At that time, he was only a perfected master. In the end, he was instantly killed without any ability to resist. However, it was also because of this that he had a rough understanding of the mechanism of the Golden Origin. At that time, he did not understand it fully. Now that he had reached the same level as Li Wuya when he created the astronomical swordsmanship, he naturally had a completely different understanding of it. He felt that if he used the Golden Origin, he would definitely be able to kill faster. It might even be a matter of an instant. However, the problem was that he might not be able to kill all of them. Moreover, the Golden Origin's consumption of elemental energy far exceeded his current method. It was a type of stellar storm that could only be formed by overdrafting a large amount of elemental energy in an instant. His current elemental energy reserves were still somewhat limited. The problem was that he could not afford to be weak after one burst of elemental energy. What if the enemy attacked again? Relatively speaking, his Dao realm transformation method could kill more thoroughly. Moreover, the consumption of elemental energy was not great. He could maintain the pressure for a long time. However, the problem was that his explosive power was slightly insufficient. He decided to visit the Sword Dao steel first before going to the land of the Yellow Dragon to set up the steel. Li Wuya's cultivation level before he set up the steel was similar to his now. If he went in now, he would have a clear understanding of the difference in strength between the two of them. Even though he was his own ancestor, And even though he was the one who stirred up *T, for a swordsman like him, it was still a very attractive thing to measure the gap between himself and the greatest swordsman in history. Because he didn't want to admit defeat, because he was confident enough. Just like that, he was immersed in his own world of swordsmanship, turning a blind eye to the 5 hidden wings who had come from afar. Only when the gloomy gazes of the people above caused the surrounding temperature to drop several degrees did he snap out of his daze. Superior Man tried his best to suppress his anger. He told himself not to be as impulsive as these winged berserkers, not because of fear, but because of each other's identities. He represented the final stance of the Winged Clan, while the other party represented the origin world. In other words, it represented the heavenly eyes. At this level, he could not let his emotions affect his decisions. Getting angry was no longer suitable for cultivators at their level. Enforcer, did you come here to exterminate the Winged Clan? Lu Xiaoyi looked at him and sighed. If you talk to me like that, then I feel that there's nothing to talk about between us. The extermination of this group of Winged Clan, half of it is because of me, and the other half is because of you. If you agree with this point of view, then maybe we could talk about it. If you don't, then we'll just have to see who's the real deal and bear the consequences of your relationship with the humans being frozen in the coming days. Superior Man choked. These words were very direct, tearing apart the hypocrisy of these half-immortals without mercy. Bramblebearer interrupted from aside. Enforcer, you think too highly of yourself. The relationship between the Winged Clan and the humans isn't completely determined by you. You can only play a part of the role, and it's not even the most important part. If you stay here, we can still maintain a good relationship with the human origin world. It's just that we have to pay a little more. The Winged Clan has been struggling for hundreds of thousands of years in the Winged Clan's sky spreading wings. We've paid a lot, so we don't mind paying a little more. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. That's a good idea. Then there's no need to talk. Kill the first emissary and satisfy the second. This is very common in the history of human negotiations. Then let's begin. I'll be at Wing Spread Sky. As long as there's a single Winged Clan person here, I won't leave. With a wave of his sword river, he was ready to fight. Superior Man watched from afar with trepidation. She didn't expect that Sword Lunatic would still be so stubborn even at this point. She knew that this strategy was called testing the bottom line, which was to force out the other party's trump card and true intentions. However, this method had a very difficult-to-grasp weakness. If things went wrong, they would be stubborn and there would be no room for negotiation. It was dancing on the tip of a knife. It depended on who was willing to go all out. Superior Man sneered. Enforcer is the most willing to go all out in the origin world. We've long heard of it, but this is Wing Spread Sky. For a beautiful future, every Winged Clan person here, regardless of their strength, is willing to go all out just like Enforcer. Lu Xiaoyi laughed. You're wrong. Whether or not I'm willing to go all out depends on whether the price is worth it. I'm alone, and you have a whole clan. Why wouldn't I go all out in this gamble? That's right. I can only play a part in the origin world, but with that part of me, I can probably wipe out Wing Spread Sky 10 times over, right? Can't you be a little more straightforward? You're not fighting, and you're not talking. Are you all just dawdling for me? He was being overbearing here, but the 5 hidden wings were in a very difficult position. The simplest way was for everyone to rush forward together, and if that didn't work, they would mobilize all the great divine wings in Wing Spread Sky. Even if they had to use the lives of the Winged Clan people, they would be able to kill Sword Lunatic. But what about after he was killed? They had to consider this very realistic question. Who was Lu Xiaoyi? He was the main culprit behind the destruction of the Hung River realm. In the history of cultivation in the universe, it was very rare for a single person to be able to destroy a top-notch large-scale realm with his rallying power. This meant that this person had a powerful rallying power in the origin world's cultivation world. Just based on this point, he could deal a heavy blow to the Winged Clan, causing them to be unable to recover from the setback. This was very realistic. They could die, but if they dragged the entire Winged Clan down with them, they would be the sinners of the Winged Clan. The winged clan already had a bad reputation in the human world. If their strength was greatly reduced, when the new era began and space merged, what awaited them would definitely be a calamity of extinction. This was the difference between a person and a clan. This swordsman's eyes were very sharp, and he could see very clearly. Chapter 22-25. Looking at the swordsman, man above man's face gradually turned cold. The five of them had been thinking about it, but it seemed that there was no other way other than to compromise. However, Fifth Sister's words had enlightened him. If the winged race lost their courage, then what was the point of integrating into the origin world? In the end, they would end up like those powerful, non-human races in the long river of history. They would either be annihilated in history or live in the wilderness, struggling at death's door. Just look at the immemorial beast bloodline, which was the strongest among the demonic beasts. To put it nicely, they were isolated and did not get involved in the affairs of the human world. In fact, they were pushed to a corner of the universe by the humans and had to live their own lives. This was the result of having the protection of the immortal world's ancient beast god. The winged race did not have any backing in the immortal court. If they did not act tough, then they would really be incurable. The only one who could save them was themselves. Heaven's movement was vigorous, and one should constantly strive for self-improvement. Therefore, even if their race was to be exterminated in the future, they had to fight through this battle. No matter how powerful this swordsman was, he had to pay the price for today's massacre. Only then would others look up to the winged race and respect them. They would think more before doing things, and not bully them again and again. When you endured the first time, you would persuade yourself to endure the second time. In the end, it would become a habit, and you would become a member of the turtle race. However, there are also techniques to fighting. The best way to fight was to not completely throw oneself into a gamble. Man above man took a deep breath and said word by word, "Enforcement judge, I'm afraid we have to fight. If not, we can't enjoy ourselves to the fullest. Either you kill to your heart's content, or we have to take revenge. We will not compete fairly with you. If we are fair, it will be the greatest injustice to the winged race. If you want to blame someone, blame it on your strength. This is not a matter between you and the winged race, but between you and us. I'm very sorry. There might be new and old friends coming to settle our grudges. We did not want to do this, but you were too much of a bully." Reaching out, he took out a scroll and unfurled it. On it, there was a lifelike image of a great Pung. This was left behind by the distant ancestor of the winged race, the great Pung immortal ancestor. It transformed into a pair of wings that spread across the heavens and earth. Everyone will fight to the death. In the blink of an eye, the venerable one unfurled the painting. Within a radius of the painting, nothing could escape from the wings spreading heaven and earth. Under the lockdown of the aura, the nearby airspace was empty. Ordinary people only felt that they had no control over their own bodies. The power of the immortal scroll made it impossible for them to resist. She knew about winged heaven and earth. After interacting with the winged race for close to 10,000 years, some secrets were no longer secrets. Among the generations of great Pungs, there was one who became an immortal monarch. However, no one knew what kind of Tao he had attained, or what kind of Tao he had attained. But one thing was for sure, it was definitely not an innate Tao. Among the two primordial kings, the Phoenix's natal great Tao was the luck Tao. The universe had the five fates, and the innate noble fate. However, it was precisely because the Tao of Phoenixes was a connate Tao that Tao integration was extraordinarily difficult. To this day, not a single Phoenix had succeeded. The Great Pung was the exact opposite. Its Tao was very mixed, and it was not an innate Tao. In this aspect, it was slightly inferior to the Phoenixes. However, misfortune was a blessing in disguise. It was precisely because its Tao was not that high-end that a great Pung actually managed to become an immortal monarch. Hence, it was back in front of the Phoenixes. After this great Pung immortal monarch became an immortal, He drew a self-portrait of himself and threw it into the lower realm. That was how he created the wings spreading heaven. In fact, it was to protect this illegitimate bloodline of the winged race. There were so many great Pung bloodlines. Basically, as long as one had wings and was more powerful, they would more or less have a trace of the great Pung bloodline in them. The only difference was how many times they had interbred. However, among all the great Pung species, they favored the species that cooperated with humans the most, the winged race. Hence, they created such a space to protect them. Of course, this was also under the pressure of the human immortal monarch. Otherwise, the winged race would multiply and become a potential threat to the human world. This was the real backer of the winged race. Of course, as bastards, they were too embarrassed to say it out loud. Once this scroll was unfurled, the great Pung in the space would have an immortal body. There are also various other wonderful uses. Of course, because the winged race's bloodline was heterogeneous, they couldn't borrow too much power. However, their physical strength would increase by a few folds, and their divine abilities would also be expanded. As for the specific changes, it wasn't something that ordinary people could fully understand. According to her understanding, if it wasn't for this wings spreading heaven and earth scroll, when the 5 hidden wings fought against the swordsman, as long as the swordsman could move freely, victory would be just a matter of time. However, now that the environment had changed, it was a little unclear. Moreover, what did he mean by there were new and old swordsman friends? That must be the swordsman's hidden enemies among the human demigods. They must be using this opportunity to fish in troubled waters and avenge private grudges. This was also what she had been worried about all this time. At this point, the problem of Zerg's red halo had already been completely thrown to the back of her mind. It also made her completely understand that when the disciples of the Fragrant Clothes sect discovered Zerg's traces in the wings spreading heaven, they had been tricked by others. It was just that the other party had done it very covertly and seamlessly. On her side, there were 2 hairy people, big and small, and her strength wasn't worth mentioning. Under normal circumstances, she might not be able to fight against the 5 strongest hidden wings, not to mention the strengthened version. No matter how careful she was, she still fell into a situation where she couldn't recover. This was the will of the heavens, so what else could she say? From the moment she started leading the way, oh no, from the moment she followed this sword lunatic into the wings spreading heaven, this was the destined ending. What about the other party? 5 strengthened hidden wings, and a few unknown human demigods. There was almost no way to fight this battle. However, she could understand the reason why the winged race did this. If the swordsman ultimately died in the hands of the human demigods, although the winged race had provided the venue and participated in it, they were ultimately just accomplices and not the main culprits. This had created a leeway for the winged race's future prospects. These winged race were truly cunning. Every force had their own goals, including her own insignificant force. However, she still couldn't understand what the swordsman's goal was. He knew that it was a trap, yet he still jumped into it without a care for his own safety. He even jumped around and provoked her. What was his goal? Just because he was confident and wanted to fight to his heart's content? Humans would eventually die, even if they were cultivators. When she realized that she was in a situation where she couldn't recover, she extinguished any thoughts of thinking of a way out. At most, she would fight with all her might and die from exhaustion. It wasn't a big deal. Among all the existences in the wings spreading heaven and earth, she was the weakest link. She also didn't think of trying her best to meet up with the swordsman. What was the point? Apart from causing trouble for others, the only thing she could do for the swordsman now was to fight to the death far away from the core battlefield. She hoped to meet a hidden wing. At the very least, she wouldn't let down the incense robe sect for so many years of perseverance and wouldn't die in the hands of the humans. Chapter 22-26. Wings spreading heaven and earth didn't seem to be anything special on the surface. The only difference between it and wings spreading heaven and earth was that it didn't even have a nebula. It was a pure blue sky with no cover and was most suitable for cultivators like the winged ones who focused on speed. Of course, it seemed like it wasn't bad for the swordsman either. However, to her, she still preferred an environment with stars, a cover, and something she could use. Because of the unique characteristics of the lavender sex martial arts and her great path concept, it was a relatively pure Taoist lineage. But under the boundless sky, it was a naked clash of force. It was more primitive, more direct, and more crude. This wasn't her style of fighting. She flew a little aimlessly. She knew very well that if she flew in the direction of the aura fluctuation, she would most likely not meet the swordsman, but an opponent instead. Thus, there was no need for her to make things difficult for herself. Perhaps the first encounter would be the end of her 10,000 years of cultivation. But so what? Once she thought it through, it didn't matter. Perhaps the heavens pitted her, and, as she wished, the first person she met was a hidden wing. She had met her third senior brother a few times, the armored man, who had always hated humans. At the very least, this made her realize that everyone was scattered when they were dragged into this, and not gathered together. However, she wasn't sure if the winged ones had a secret way of communicating with each other. In her opinion, as to Peng's celestial painting, it should have such a function. The armored man also noticed this human girl. This made him a little disappointed. He had hoped that he would be the first to meet the swordsman. Because his abilities had improved, he was confident that he could deal with the swordsman. He wasn't the great divine wings, nor was he the human half-immortal trash. As one of the 5 hidden wings with the highest status in the winged race, he had his own pride. Although he was disappointed, it was still better to meet the swordsman. There were only 2 of them, and the probability of them meeting was still very low. He would use this human girl as a warm-up before settling the score with the swordsman. In their plan, no matter who encountered an opponent, they had to inform the others immediately. However, he personally felt that this rule was only applicable to swordsmen and was meaningless to this woman. If such an ordinary human demigod needed more than 2 hidden wings to deal with, then there was really no need for them to go to the origin world. He could not inform his companions. Otherwise, if 5th junior sister found out, she would definitely stop him from killing them. For the sake of a human friend, this junior sister of his was somewhat unable to distinguish the severity of the matter. There was nothing much to say. Let's meet in battle. Both of them had the same thought. What surprised the armored man was that the woman didn't choose to run away. Instead, she chose to fight. Did he know that he was going to die? The armored man performed a wing cord slash, and his invisible wings turned into a longbow. The eagle feathers were like arrows, and they shot out suddenly. The Tao state he was leaning towards was strength. This was also one of the great Taos that was most suitable for the winged man's body. To him, this Tao state was more inclined towards battle than immortality. Immortality was still too far away for the winged man, even before the era changed. For someone like him, before dreaming of becoming an immortal, the first thing he had to consider was how to survive. How could he bring the winged race to the origin world? This was a more practical goal. The woman waved her white hand, and a series of half-immortal tools floated out. Above her head, a translucent canopy with green trees appeared. This was half of her auspicious cloud. She cultivated the creation Tao. This innate great Tao was more inclined towards support and tenacity of life. However, in terms of attack, it was less than other Tao states. It was one of the few innate great Taos that didn't lean towards battle. It was more suitable for research, exploration, and cultivation. Therefore, a cultivator's attitude towards the great changes in the universe was often related to their choice of Tao state. If you chose slaughter, destruction, and thunder, you wouldn't be able to live a peaceful life. Similarly, if you chose the creation Tao, the 5 ties, and so on, you would have to endure the dull loneliness. However, the creation Tao wasn't good at attacking, and that was only relatively speaking. In terms of gathering the auspicious cloud, it had another merit and opened up a new path. The woman was just interested in it, but it didn't mean that she didn't know about the dangers of the cultivation world. Every cultivator had to focus on protecting themselves. Therefore, her auspicious cloud was relatively more mature. She had at least 3,000 years of foundation. Moreover, the creation Tao's auspicious cloud was famous for its endless growth. The auspicious cloud defended itself, and the half-immortal tool attacked the opponent. This was the woman's most classic balance of attack and defense. This made the armored man feel very uncomfortable. In a battle with human cultivators, what he hated the most was being entangled with this kind of Taoist method that was weak in attack and strong in defense. It wasn't satisfying to fight because the winged man's body couldn't display its greatest advantage in battle. He shockingly discovered that if it wasn't for the fact that his body strength was increased by the winged heaven and earth, he might not be able to defeat this woman under normal circumstances. He had two options. One was to use his divine ability to deal with the opponent's half-immortal tool, and then focus on dealing with that half of the auspicious cloud. The other was to take a little risk. One's personality determined one's behavior. Moreover, he didn't want his companions to see that he was powerless in the hands of someone they thought was weak. The most important thing was that there were other human half-immortals in the winged heaven and earth. They were here to deal with the swordsman, not the lavender sect. Once the humans discovered the existence of this woman, they would definitely come out to mediate. Then, he would no longer have the chance to kill this human half-immortal Kuan-Shio who had been opposing the winged man for many years. In the previous war, although this woman wasn't the main force, her large-scale supportability played a very important role in the war. Even many of his clansmen were killed in that war. He had always wanted to take revenge, and now was the best opportunity. He had his own unique method to deal with the auspicious cloud, and that was to plant himself in it. The auspicious cloud, which was based on the great Tao of creation, was characterized by its powerful regenerative ability. If you couldn't destroy it in one strike, it would immediately recover, reflecting the miraculous ability of the concept of creation. His attack was very strong, and his strength was especially sufficient. However, his weakness was that he wasn't flexible enough in the suppression of the Tao realm. This was a common problem left behind by the winged man who was proficient in divine abilities. The heavenly Tao was fair. It wouldn't give you a divine ability and an extraordinary comprehension ability of the Tao realm. This was a kind of balance. The sharpness of his powerful attack was only relative to ordinary half-immortals. It hadn't reached the abnormal level of Lu Xiaoyi. Therefore, he could only destroy 60 to 70% of the auspicious cloud every time. He couldn't penetrate it. If it was Lu Xiaoyi, he would use the Tao realm of creation to penetrate the last 30 to 40% of the auspicious cloud. However, he couldn't do it. Therefore, he came up with the idea of planting himself in the auspicious cloud. What he relied on was the combination of his strength and divine ability. This was the foundation of the winged man's battle. It wasn't difficult to plant himself in the auspicious cloud, because in terms of movement, he was much better than the swordsman. Chapter 22-27. The vegetarian couldn't escape. Compared to the winged man, she was just a turtle. Looking at the armored man circling in the sky, she pointed her finger, and a gourd in front of her spewed out a green light. This was the earth-dissolving breath, which was the reverse application of the creation path to hasten the growth of all living things. It was usually used when there was a deviation in the process of life, giving life a chance to start over. It was mainly suitable for plants, but it could also be used on living things. Reverse application could be a kind of healing process, but with a little change, it could also be a means of killing. The vegetarian was deeply immersed in this aspect, and it was also her main means of attack. The main reason was that her other means were relatively ordinary and their effects were ordinary. It was purely dependent on the strength of cultivation. Only the earth-dissolving breath could really erode the foundation of a life, especially for a cultivation creature with a general understanding of the Tao realm. The armored man actually didn't care much about her other means. The woman had several half-immortal treasures with different functions, but he could even resist most of them. However, he didn't want to touch the breath from a gourd because he knew that it would be troublesome if he touched it. Perhaps he wouldn't die immediately, but this reverse process of life would make him feel like he was dead and lose part of his fighting capacity. It was very annoying. Although the green light was strong, it was useless if it couldn't hit the target. Although it didn't have wings, the movement ability of the hidden wings was extraordinarily unpredictable. It was combined with a part of the spatial ability, and it couldn't be represented by speed alone. The green light hit the armored man, but his body had already turned into a clear light. When he reappeared, he was very close to the vegetarian. This set of close combat methods had been used many times, so the vegetarian knew how to deal with it. Before the green light from the gourd condensed again, she still had several powerful treasures to play a role of resistance. The yin-yang spectroscopic mirror was stimulated by the vegetarian, and the shadow of the winged man appeared in the mirror. This was to prevent the armored man from using the space mirror image again. She didn't use it before because the distance was too far and she couldn't figure out the exact location of the winged man. She couldn't aim at the target, so of course, it would take twice the effort for half the result. Now that she was close, it was easy to cover. Once the yin-yang spectroscopic light was taken down, all that was left was pure attack. In the previous battles, the armored men were usually forced to retreat at this stage. This was also the most effective method for the non-armored men who were not good at close combat. There were different ways to fight between half-immortals. Some were good at instant magic arts, some were good at weapons, and some stood in formation. At this level, it couldn't simply understand how powerful instant magic arts were. Those who played with weapons. In fact, there was no half-immortal who didn't know magic instant magic art. It was unimaginable that a cultivator who was only one step. The immortal's immortal. The instant magic art had more variations and combinations, more tactical options, and a higher degree of freedom. It was a means of active attack and change, which was the favorite of combat-type cultivators. On the other hand, the instant magic art relied on treasures to pursue greater power. It could exert power to the extreme, so you had to dodge and defend. But relatively speaking, the instant magic art had fewer variations and limited tactical options. After all, there were only a few truly powerful treasures. No matter how many variations there were, the combinations were limited. It was suitable for conservative cultivators, such as the vegetarian. Her real expertise was in group support in large-scale cultivation battlefield. But when it came to individual fights, her expertise didn't have much meaning. Therefore, when the armored man got close to her, her counterattack method was relatively monotonous. The yin-yang spectroscopic mirror covered the real body of the winged man, and the two treasures immediately shone brightly. One was a sharp eyebrow pencil, and the other was a nail clipper. Both treasures were tough and sharp. She could see very clearly that if she used a completely Taoist method to restrict the agile winged man, she would always feel a little slow and unable to keep up with the changes. Instead, it was strength against strength. Although she couldn't kill the opponent, since her purpose was only to stop the opponent, the power of the two treasures was enough. Finally, it depended on her gourd's earth-melting breath. The armored man patted the top of his head, and a supernatural power immediately appeared. His body instantly became golden red, and he entered the ancient bloodline time of a few breaths. This kind of supernatural power actually had side effects on the winged man's body. But in a relatively special environment like the winged man's heaven and earth, there were no restrictions. This was the invisible benefit that the picture scroll brought to the winged man. The sharp eyebrow pencil couldn't make a mark, and the nail clipper also failed to make a mark on the golden red body. In such a short moment of collision, the distance between the two was much closer. The armored man was eager to advance, while the vegetarian was calm in the face of danger. Just as the sharp eyebrow pencil and nail clipper failed to achieve anything, two more treasures shot out. One was the rouge buckle, and the other was the sea-calming pearl necklace. These two treasures required the treasures to fly out on their own to be effective. The rouge buckle was a shackle made of pure gold. One end locked the enemy, while the other was connected to the front star. Once it was locked, the entire person would be bound by the huge star, and following that would be a series of methods. The sea-calming pearl necklace was a shackle made of pure water. The water was formless, but it had a myriad of transformations. It was the softest and most in-water shackle the enemy. It was the least afraid of powerful opponents, because no matter how much one struggled or changed shape, the water shackles would still bind tightly. There was no such thing as breaking the shackles would be impossible. With this kind of shackle, the victim wouldn't be able to break free in a short period of time. The armored man was expressionless. He continued to rush forward, and the advantage of his speed was brought to the extreme. In the blink of an eye, the rouge buckle had locked his ankle, and the sea-calming pearl necklace had wrapped around his waist. However, he smiled strangely, and his entire golden-red body suddenly faded away, just like a snake shedding its skin. Of course, those with wings wouldn't have the ability to shed their skin like scales. However, even if he couldn't shed his skin, he could change his hair. This was a very special ability of hidden wings, known as the undressing ability. Through this kind of new look, he could remove all the shackles placed on his body. The rouge buckle locked a callous skin, and the sea-calming pearl necklace locked a pile of white hair. The distance between them had already reached the edge of a dangerous close-range state. The ordinary person was still calm. She was very clear that if she were to use her escape technique now, with the difference in speed, it would be very difficult for her to have the time to activate her treasures. Close to 10,000 years of cultivation was to cultivate this heart of great Tao. Every time she was in danger, she would naturally enter a meditative state. She didn't move and was as steady as Mount Tai. Finally, two treasures flashed. One was the nodding hairpin, and the other was the retreating hair ornament. The nodding hairpin was a close-range hairpin. Its range of use was very limited, and it was the last resort of the ordinary person's close-range attack. Although it was called a treasure, it was actually connected to her mind. Every nodding hairpin was an attempt to seek spiritual resonance. Under 3 nodding hairpins, they would definitely synchronize, and what followed would be a spiritual storm. It was hard to say who would win, but it could instantly pull the close-range battle into the rhythm of a spiritual battle. It would advance into an indescribably dangerous spiritual confrontation, and it was a little bit of a suicidal stance. The retreating hair ornament was used in conjunction with the nodding hairpin. The nodding hairpin was used for spiritual confrontation, and the retreating hair ornament's function was to ensure that the most basic safe distance between the owner and the opponent was maintained during the process of spiritual confrontation. After the ordinary person had mastered this set of attack and defense, this was her first time using it in actual combat. Chapter 22-28. At the last moment, humans were always able to erupt with astonishing battle prowess. Even if it was a woman, the armored man was already very careful, but this woman's various methods still gave him a headache. He was not willing to enter a spiritual storm with a human. Demonic beasts were incomparably strong physically, but even so, humans were still able to dominate the cultivation world of the universe by relying on their spiritual power. Spiritual power was not only a matter of spiritual power, but also the essence and application of spiritual power. In this aspect, humans were far superior to any other species in the universe. Humans had faith, techniques, and incomparable tenacity in their spiritual power. This was the best way for humans to deal with non-human species. Using each person's strong points and avoiding their weak points was the true essence of battle. If a normal person wanted to bypass their physical power and compete with their spiritual power, he naturally wanted to bypass their spiritual power and compete with their physical power and bloodline. Under normal circumstances, when his opponent used the nodding hairpin, his best option would be to use his movement speed to quickly get away from the nodding hairpin's resonating range. Then, he would fight from afar and slowly come up with a plan. He would still be able to win, but it would consume a lot of time. However, now that he was in Immortal Peng's self-portrait, he didn't need to be so careful. With a long cry, the rock's blood boiled. The ancient and thin rock's bloodline was originally unable to boil because the concentration was not high enough. But here, with Immortal Peng's help, this critical point was ignored. Under the boiling of the rock's blood, the hairpin had only nodded once before it was blown to pieces by the violent power of the bloodline. This was also the common weakness of all spiritual treasures. They placed too much emphasis on spiritual power, but their bodies were not solid enough. The hairpin was destroyed, and the ornament was destroyed as well. The few other treasures in front of the woman were destroyed as well. At such a close distance, the immortal's bloodline was boiling. The power of the bloodline was so great that it was beyond the capabilities of the woman. With a long cry, the armored man broke through the final limit of distance and charged forward. The normal person's eyes were cold, as if the loss of her treasures had nothing to do with her. The auspicious cloud turned and aimed in the direction of the enemy, charging forward. She had never been good at such crude close combat, but the last moment, she did not mind facing the enemy head-on. Cultivators from a front star did not retreat when facing the winged race. This was the reason why they could rely on the strength of one star to contend against the entire winged race for hundreds of thousands of years. Her response was not a problem from the beginning to the end, but in the end he still fell into the armored man's trap when he went up against the auspicious cloud. In fact, the most effective, wretched, and shameless thing to do at such a time was to turn around and run. Wait for the rock's blood to boil to pass. Due to the continuous use of God art, the armored man's current situation wasn't as unstoppable as it seemed. He could no longer maintain his speed, his power had to be slowed down, and his God art had to be recharged. However, Serene wasn't an expert in battle. She was lacking in experience. Originally, she had been able to maintain her steadfast Tao heart and deal with it normally. However, in the end, she was stirred up by the aura of the armored man and made a huge mistake. Using the auspicious clouds to clash with the armored man's blood rock before the duration of the armored man's blood rock was over was exactly what the opponent wanted. It was really not easy. The armored man was secretly relieved. His head collided with his opponent's auspicious cloud, but he wasn't sent flying like a normal situation. Instead, his head blended into the cloud. It was as if his body was no longer that of the winged race, which was known for its strength, but more like a puddle of water. When the rock blood boiled, wasn't it just a pool of burning blood? The auspicious clouds of creation grew and multiplied endlessly. The immortal rock blood burned his life. The direct result of this contact was that the rock blood boiled and began to absorb energy from the auspicious clouds like a whale sucking in water. In an instant, the armored man was like a burning god. A faintly discernible winged creature appeared behind his back. At first glance, it looked a little like a phoenix, but upon closer inspection, it was different. It was less noble and more wild. The rock blood burned more and more vigorously, and the auspicious clouds became more and more shriveled. The speed was so fast that before Serene could react, she had already been sucked in and couldn't break free. The auspicious clouds were magical and extraordinary. They were the ultimate attack and defense of a half-immortal cultivator. They were closely related to the cultivator's spirit, elemental energy, and even spirituality. It could be said that they were the continuation of life. Once she was sucked in, she was destined to end up as a Serene. A beautiful human being would be sucked dry. This was the armored man's battle strategy. The core was the rock blood boiling. Although it was difficult in the early stages, when Serene joined in at the end, the plan went exceptionally smoothly. Once she was sucked in, unless he stopped on his own initiative, this woman wouldn't be able to make a comeback. Secretly contacting the higher-ups of the winged people and borrowing my junior sister's soft-heartedness. Hurry up and tell me, what are you scheming? The armored man was very pleased with himself. Although the process was very dangerous, the result was very beautiful. It was a perfect kill. Serene's heart was like dead ashes. She knew that her struggle would end here. This kind of death was incomparably sullen. She couldn't even take him down with her, because the more she erupted with her potential, the more she provided the opponent with the rock blood boiling. She was strong, but the enemy was stronger. In the end, it was a joke. Therefore, she didn't struggle anymore. Since she couldn't break off this kind of sucking, after the auspicious clouds were sucked dry, her life potential would be absorbed. This kind of death wouldn't even allow her to be reborn, because the energy needed for rebirth wouldn't be present. Smiling faintly, he began to tidy up his appearance. People who are scheming see everything as a scheme. With light in their hearts, the world is incomparably beautiful. The winged people entered the world with this kind of mentality. Without needing anyone to kill them, they would die from exhaustion. It's just a matter of taking a step first or a step later. The armored man laughed loudly. Every human will be like you before they die. It's as if they have comprehended some kind of true meaning of life. It's just a hypocritical desire to survive, wanting to arouse the sympathy of others. It's a pity that you got the wrong target. We, the winged people, are born to live. We want to live brilliantly. Death is death. We want to die with a bang. Unlike you, it's as if death is just another beginning. It's filled with a sense of ritual. It's just cowardly people deceiving themselves. While laughing, the suction didn't decrease in the slightest. Instead, it became even more powerful. It wasn't that the winged people didn't have tender feelings for the fairer sex. But even if Serene was a peerless beauty, that was only among humans. But in the winged people race, such beauties could be found everywhere. Especially the half-immortal hidden wings, for example, his junior sister. This human girl was truly hateful. Of all things, she just had to come to winged sky to seduce fifth junior sister, this kind of winged people's beauty. Because of him, this kind of outstanding winged people half-immortal, his junior sister had never looked him in the eye. This girl deserved to die, because she had brought those bad habits of humans to the winged people. They were all like this. Male with male, female with female. Sooner or later, the race would be severed. They had to kill to stop the same. Chapter 22-29. Seeing that the auspicious cloud of Suyu's cultivation was about to come to an end, and that her body's life potential would not last for more than 10 breaths, the armored man was feeling complacent. Suddenly, he felt that something was wrong. Two auras quietly appeared in the space around him. Immediately after, a familiar cold voice sounded. "Let her go. Otherwise, don't blame me for disregarding the friendship between us." The armored man immediately fell from the peak of happiness to the bottom of a cold valley. However, he did not want to give up. He wanted to bet that the other party would not kill him. "Junior sister, in front of an outsider, are you going to disregard the friendship between us?" Before he heard a reply, another aura had already locked onto him, making him feel extreme danger. Although he did not know what would happen next, he knew that for a half-immortal, this kind of action was already enough to express her attitude. The key point was that this aura was not familiar. It was very unfamiliar. It belonged to a human half-immortal. He could bet that his junior sister would not be ruthless, but he did not dare to bet that a human cultivator would not be ruthless. If it was that swordsman, he was shocked. Everything was to protect himself. With a decision, the boiling stopped abruptly. At the same time, the power of the rock blood was sent into the woman's body. This was not fatal, but it would disturb her for a long time. She would need to continuously expel it. At the very least, for a short period of time, this woman would not be able to fight with anyone while she was in winged heaven and earth. He slowly retreated to the side. He was not sure if the two people who came were really his junior sister and that swordsman. It was more likely that it was his junior sister and a human half-immortal who came to help. However, he could not gamble. He could gamble with other people's lives, but he could not gamble with his own. In his line of sight, two figures slowly appeared. One of them quickly flew over, but he did not react. That was his fifth junior sister. His fifth junior sister scanned with her divine sense and understood the situation of Suyu. She knew the reason for this too well. She was glaring at the armored man. "Look at what you have done. In the next clan meeting, I will apply for clan punishment." The armored man ignored her and looked at the other figure. It was not the swordsman, but a monk. The monk bowed from afar. Good. Our target this time is not her. Almsgiver, you must not act rashly." The armored man sensed the monk's aura and couldn't help but raise his guard. This was an instinctive precaution against dangerous people. Of course, in theory, they were on the same side. The key was the monk's roots. Humans had countless inheritances and roots. Most of them were ordinary, but there were some that were very special and had special abilities. Taoism was like that, and Buddhism was no exception. For example, this monk was the extremely rare PG Buddha. What is Pratya Buddha? Without the protection of a teacher, he relied on his own understanding to prove it. It was also known as karmic enlightenment or solitary enlightenment. Before the Buddha was born, or in a place where the Buddha had not preached, he could be counted as a PG Buddha if he could understand part of the truth of the universe. Such a monk possessed an extraordinary Buddha nature. It was not the ability to reincarnate from the past, but a true Buddha nature. Therefore, he had many abilities that ordinary monks did not possess. It was not because monks like them had high combat power, but because their fighting style and methods were very special. If you were not familiar with them and try to understand them with normal thinking, you would easily be at a disadvantage. In the cultivation world, the most taboo thing was to have a cultivator who had no inheritance at all and had cultivated the Buddha realm. This was because when you faced him, you would often be confused, but he would understand you very well. Just as the armored man was still guessing whether the monk was karmic enlightenment or solitary enlightenment, fifth junior sister on the other side supported the slightly exhausted Sue and apologized. "Little Sue, I'm late. I've caused you to suffer." Sue smiled bitterly. "Aunt Shue, you've saved me again. Don't talk about suffering, I asked for it. I was the one who brought that swordsman here. I was the one who led the way. With the relationship between humans and winged people, killing me is justified. There's nothing to say." Fifth junior sister sighed. "You're such a smart person. Why did you come here before the end of the era instead of staying in the exterior? Don't tell me it's for Zerg. Don't tell me it's for all of humanity. All of humanity is peaceful and healthy, but you left the Vanguard Star to guard the front line alone. After hundreds of thousands of years, I'm afraid your resentment has already broken through the sky, right?" Sue remained silent, but fifth junior sister didn't go too far. "Follow me. At least you'll be safer this way." That monk's words might not be sincere. If he was alone, I'm afraid he would be similar to my senior brother. It's just that our third senior brother at least gave you a fair chance to fight, but this monk might not. Paiji monks are the most unreasonable part of Buddhism. They have the ability of a real monk, but they don't have the deep-rooted constraints of the Buddhism system. In fact, they're no different from the Devil sect in Taoism. The four of them combined into one group, 3 people and a prisoner of war, and flew in a direction unhurriedly. Surin took a long time to recover from the remnant of the rock's blood boiling. In terms of mental strength, the winged men were inferior to humans, but in terms of physical strength, humans were far inferior to Yao beasts. The winged men were actually a race between humans and Yao beasts. They couldn't ascend to the sky, nor could they descend to the ground. Their mental strength was inferior to humans, and their physical strength was inferior to Yao beasts. It was very awkward. However, the rock's blood was the most ancient and most noble bloodline among Yao beasts. When it entered the body, how could an ordinary human resist the power of the bloodline? Even though it was just a trace, it still allowed Su Rin to recover for a period of time. Now, she couldn't say that she had completely expelled it, but she could already move about while healing herself. The armored man and the monk flew in front, while the two of them followed behind. Ironically, The two of them were the ones who truly talked about everything among the four of them. Serene sighed and said, "How could I not know that I'm only looking for trouble by coming here? I made up an excuse, claiming that I'm here to prevent the fragrant clothes sect from being involved in the matters before and after the arrival of the new era. However, I also know that this is simply impossible. It's not because this matter has nothing to do with the fragrant clothes sect or because of some other reason. The true reason for our safety is actually the weakness of the fragrant clothes sect. With the strength of our orthodoxy, what right do we have to occupy a place in the ever-changing universe?" Fifth junior sister was very curious. "Then why did you insist on coming here? Or did you choose this kind of timing?" Serene looked at her, her eyes burning. "Because this is Master's order. Before Master left, he told me that if the fragrant clothes sect is destined to be ordinary, then we will be ordinary. There's no need to fight for anything. We don't have the strength, nor do we have the ideals. However, if the heavens want the fragrant clothes sect to not be ordinary, then we can actually occupy a place in the new era, even if it's just an insignificant place. However, the prerequisite is that we have to meet a person or the orthodoxy that person belongs to. If we meet them, then we have to follow them without hesitation." Chapter 22:30. This time, it was fifth junior sister's turn to be speechless. However, Serene did not want to let her off. "Aunt Shwe, don't play dumb with me. My master said that if I have any questions, I can ask you, because you and my master know that person." Fifth junior sister was startled and smiled bitterly. This old friend of hers had been gone for thousands of years, and she still wanted to drag her into a trap. However, she also knew that this might not be a trap. It could also be the shore. It all depended on how one looked at it. However, Serene, the best disciple of her old friend, she had no choice but to answer. "Yes, I know that person. A chance encounter changed many of my views. However, I have to make one thing clear. If it was the person we knew, I would know which side to stand on even without you telling me. However, this person isn't him. Although he looks similar, he isn't him. I'm not alone. There are millions of people behind me. Therefore, when I take any risks, I need to consider carefully and not act rashly. Just like this time, it's hard to say whether this fellow can cross this hurdle. Don't think that his past achievements are amazing. He's never been in a situation where he's surrounded by strong enemies. Most of them have countless helpers behind them. They have morals and can come and go as they please. It's impossible for a person to come and go as he pleases. There will always be times when he's in danger. This time, it's the time to prove his strength. I don't think so, because I know what kind of people have come this time." Serene did not want to delve too deeply into it, because the information they could obtain now was too little. She understood Aunt Shwe's choice. Not to mention the millions of people in the winged men sect. She did not dare to take sides with her small lavender sect. She could only use a more roundabout method to slowly understand by watching, listening, and thinking. She could not just slap her head, even if this was the strategy left behind by her most respected master. Now, she was the person at the helm of Lavender Sect. She had the obligation to fulfill her responsibilities and not listen to others. It was because she had such an independent personality that her lover had passed the burden to her. "Who have come? Is it convenient to talk about it?" Fifth junior sister smiled. "There's nothing inconvenient about it. Follow us, and you'll see it soon. In this wings spanning heavens operation, although we, the wing people, are the masters, we are not the main characters. What Zerg? How can we tolerate this in Wingspread Sky? If we let them do as they please, when the red flood overflows and they can't get out, will they fight with us Wing Clan for territory? Will they fight within the Wing Clan?" It was just a well-planned excuse. His target was the newly emerging demigod faction in the Origin world, and this swordsman was the leader of this faction. There are many factions involved, such as the Old Fixed Corporation, the Conservative faction, some of the Buddhist sects, and the Impure Lands. These are all known, and there are also those who might come, but I haven't seen them yet. For example, the Apum? The vegetarian clicked her tongue. So many? How many people had this swordsman offended? How old was he? It hasn't been long since he became a half-immortal, right? Just like that, you've offended everyone in the cultivation world of the universe? Fifth junior sister licked her lips. Clearly, she was also very excited about the upcoming grand occasion. Of course, it's not about their age, but what they want to do. In the history of the dynasties, which dynasty didn't overturn the old order and establish new rules? How could they not touch the vested interests of others? So seriously speaking, these factions only have one characteristic, which is that they have the most benefits in this era. They're not willing to give up on the meat in their mouths, so they naturally want to destroy the subversive faction. Even if the new era comes, they still want to rule this universe. This is a hurdle that a new faction must pass through. Only by passing through it can you prove that you have the ability to overturn the world. Otherwise, how can you snatch food from Tiger's mouth? Their target was not just Lu Xiaoyi, but all of the new factions. They were too happy in the early stages and did not put the old order in their eyes, so they were a little too complacent. However, as the leader of the new faction, this swordsman was someone they had to deal with. Only by dealing with him, the others would deal with some of their die-hard followers. Only then would this new faction collapse and disappear. So, they can only succeed and not fail. If they fail this time, the other scenes can't continue. Once the new faction crosses this hurdle, they will definitely grow stronger and walk on the path of overturning the world. Their brilliant momentum will no longer be able to be stopped. So, do you understand now? What kind of people were going to appear here? How can they allow an accident to happen? Su Ren was stunned. She knew that she was involved in a storm, but she did not expect it to be so big. She thought that it was just a flood in her hometown, but she did not expect to encounter a tsunami in the deep sea. She could not help but ask herself, if she really knew this, would she still take the risk to join this adventure? There was no answer, but there were many questions. But Aunt Shay, as the host, you didn't seem to mention the wingman's attitude in this storm. I'm very curious. Shouldn't the wingman be tightly tied to these factions? Fifth junior sister was a little bitter. Of course. Do you think we have any other choice? If we join the new faction, do you think these geniuses will look at us in the eye? But is it safe to stand on the side we're on now? I don't think so. Su Ren was deep in thought, but she could not figure it out. What do you mean? Fifth junior sister's rare good temper was also because the person in front of her was a descendant of an old friend, someone she trusted. Or rather, she was leaving a way out for herself. The current union seems to be powerful, but they are divided at heart, fighting and scheming against each other, unable to form a united force. Occasionally, when they meet a common enemy that is difficult to deal with, they can still reluctantly work together. But once the threat is removed, they will tear each other apart. Especially when they see benefits. Once they see benefits, they will not recognize anyone. So if we, the wingman, are too obvious in this matter, it may not be a good thing. We may be pushed out as scapegoats and become the target of a new faction's revenge. In this way, these old fellows will have achieved their goal of eliminating the enemy, disintegrating the new faction, and finally punishing the main culprit, the wingman. They will definitely be able to rope in some of the new factions, killing many birds with one stone. Were we in it? We are chess pieces or abandoned chess pieces. What do you think we should do? Even if she was an extremely intelligent person, she was still confused by this series of twists and turns. Aunt Shay, you're really thinking far ahead. Fifth junior sister snorted. If you had the lives of millions of clansmen at stake, you would also rack your brains to think. That's why third senior brother killed you without hesitation. It's to express to the cultivation world in the future that the vision of the winged man only stops at the front line and does not care about anything else. If it was someone else, I wouldn't save them, because this is in line with the interests of the winged man. But since it's you, I have no choice but to save you. Even I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, or is it wrong? Chapter 22:31. Surin was completely fooled. She did not expect that even she would be involved in this. But Aunt Shue, you said that the Great Rock might come? The relationship between the winged men and the Great Rock is known by the entire universe. It seems impossible for you to completely disassociate yourselves from it, right? Fifth junior sister looked up and took a deep breath. Regarding the position of the winged men, this is the key to determining the future of the winged men. We don't talk about bloodlines, because the problem of bloodlines is a problem that can never be solved. Who has more points? Who has less points? This is the way of thinking of stupid people. We only talk about the environment, an environment that is more beneficial to the winged men. Then let me ask you, when a new era arrives and the universe fuses, will it be better for the winged men to exist as a subspecies? Or will it be easier to survive as a subspecies? Surin did not hesitate. Of course it will be better to survive as a subspecies. How many great rocks are there? They still have the same temperament. Fifth junior sister smiled. That's why I said that the winged men should not be too close to the great rock now. As time passed, the two are no longer the same species. Why should they still be entangled? This operation was led by the great rock. It provided the venue to divide the benefits of the new and old forces within the human race. They did not negotiate well and started fighting. It's that simple. What does it have to do with us? We just have no choice. Who can we offend? The old guys are huge in numbers. We can't afford to offend them. The conservative forces have immortals behind them. We can't afford to offend them, not to mention the Buddhist sects. Can we afford to offend the new forces? Lu Xiaoyi killed nearly 1,000 of our winged men elites in one go. What strange things did we say? Didn't we just silently endure it? This is our position. Surin was dumbfounded. She thought that the master was just a handyman who helped to set up the stage. This position, to think that they could think of it. It was very absurd, but incomparably real. What was wrong with it? Without this understanding, there was only one result. When the incident happened, they were cannon fodder. When it happened, they were abandoned. Could it be that you thought that those big forces would stand out and take all the blame? We, the winged men, have thought about this problem for countless years. In the end, I only understood the profoundness of it after listening to the words of a swordsman. That's why we're where we are now. What your master said was actually correct. That person was indeed capable of great things, and he really did it, but at that time there were 4 people. 1 swordsman, 1 Xionggu, 1 your master, and 1 me, Snowy Feather. Now that the 3 of them are gone, I'm the only one left. The affairs of the world were impermanent. The choice of the heavens really made people speechless. Therefore, after I became a half-immortal, I gave myself the title Immortal in order to commemorate them. That unforgettable memory, the sorrow in your heart, is for eternity. Surin was also immersed in her thoughts. There were many things in the past, present, and future. There was herself and others. She was completely unable to control herself and went with the flow. Aunt Shue, I heard that after the new era began, even ancient beasts couldn't escape the changes. A former king might not always be a king. Therefore, no one can say for sure what kind of changes will happen to Depeng in the future. It's not unreasonable to make a private division now. Snowy Feather smiled. She couldn't do anything about the true temper of this junior. Little Sue, your honest words really make me feel a little ashamed. However, though your words are a little crude, they do make sense. The 4 of them flew, and after a dozen days, others began to join them. After a few more days, they finally arrived at a space that felt like the center of wings spread heaven and earth. However, what exactly was the purpose of coming here? In this space, including them, not including Surin, there were a total of 19 people. Among them, there were 5 winged men, 4 monks, and 7 Taoists. There were also 3 who couldn't be seen from their attire. All of them were full of vigor, and all of them were either 5th decay or 2nd severance. Judging from their aura alone, none of them were weak. Even the 5 hidden wings of the winged men who had received the boost from wings spread heaven and earth were faintly the weakest among them. Surin was speechless. Is there need to go so far to deal with one person? Great Dafa Snowy Feather introduced them to her because she wanted to use this method to let the world know the true details of this matter. Of the four monks, Monk Pai Ji and Monk Du Lu were the first ones you saw. There's also Monk Shua of Great Snow Mountain, second severance of Interior Heaven, a Luo Kan of Carefree Heaven Kingdom, preacher of Sutras of the Western Paradise, Luo the Minister, Night Guardian of the Sixth Heaven, Seven Planets, Mai Heaven. Serene secretly clicked her tongue when she heard this. Of the four monks, none of them were Exterior Heaven. It wasn't that the Exterior Heaven elders and half-immortals didn't participate in this matter, but with their strength, they didn't have the right to participate. This was more terrifying. Monk Pai Ji Dulu, his origins were mysterious, and no one understood him. It was also because of this mystery that no one dared to underestimate him. Great Snow Mountain's monk Shi Luo was one of the top 5 in the second severance of Interior Heaven. The difference between Interior Heaven and Exterior Heaven was needless to say about their strength. The Carefree Heavenly Kingdom was actually a Buddhist kingdom in a dream. It was a place that didn't exist in reality, and for a place that didn't exist to be famous in the Western Heaven where Buddhism was flourishing, it could be seen from this that a Luo Kan status in the main world's Buddhism. The position of a sutra preacher was different from that of an abbot. It could be very low, but it could also be very noble. A Luo Kan was obviously the latter. To be able to become a sutra preacher in the Western Heaven, he was naturally also a sutra preacher of the other 3 heavens. He had received the Immortal Court's special permission to not be confined in the Exterior Heaven, which showed how much the Immortal Court's Buddhism valued him. The position of Night Guardian was an empty position, and more importantly, it represented a kind of recognition. There were 36 heavens above, and starting from the great crimson heaven of the grand pure realm of the 33 heavens, it was the territory of human immortals. Naturally, there was no need for mortal cultivators to guard it, but every day below the 33 heavens, there would be a Night Guardian. Night did not refer to the night, and there was no night or day in the sky. It actually referred to the so-called evil and all unclean things. Of course, unclean things would not be so foolish as to run to places where immortals gathered, so this was an empty position. It meant that with this person's strength and virtue, he could be a guard dog of the Immortal Court in the lower realm. Similarly, he would not be restrained by the interior and exterior heavens and could come and go freely. There were still 32 heavens below the 33 heavens, which meant that there were 32 qualified dogs. However, the Immortal Court was a huge mansion with 36 courtyards. Of course, the dogs guarding the outermost courtyard were the native dogs. Going further in, there were wolf dogs, shepherd dogs, hunting dogs, bulldogs, mastiffs, pastoral dogs, golden retrievers, huskies, pugs, and so on. The further in the courtyard they guarded, the closer they were to the 33 heavens where the immortals were in the inner courtyard. This meant that they were more loyal, more capable, more appreciated, and more likely to become immortals. Out of the 32 dogs, the law of the minister, who could be the 6th guard of the courtyard, was a dog with considerable strength. Chapter 22:32. Snowy Feather sighed when she sensed Su Yu's surprise. Now do you understand why I'm not optimistic about that swordsman, Lu Xiaoyi? Even Li Wuya hasn't experienced such a situation. It can be seen how much the Immortal Court is afraid of Xuanyuan Swordvane after Li Wuya caused trouble. They have been observing to see if this Lu Xiaoyi has the potential of Li Wuya. Now that they have seen it, the result is to plow the court and sweep the cave, strike like thunder, and kill a chicken with a butcher's knife. In a sealed place like wings spreading sky, they are looking forward to finishing it in one fell swoop. Su took a deep breath and felt sad. In such a situation, she couldn't do anything. No matter how good her state of mind was, she couldn't help but doubt the path she had chosen. Then what about the others? Shuiyu glanced around. Let's talk about the 7 Taoists. Drunken Yang Taoist is one of the top masters of the exterior realm. You should have heard of him since we're both in the exterior realm. Taoist Hua Hai the preacher of the eastern elephant heaven, and the preacher of the western heaven, a Luo Kan. The two of them are mortal enemies in the great Tao. Now, they're on the same side because of the swordsman. It's ridiculous. Senbai, it's said that he made a mistake as an immortal and was banished to the lower realm. Such a situation only happened in the immortal court. Now that the universe is in chaos, the immortal court can't even take care of itself. How could he be banished to the lower realm in such a chaotic world? What did he do in the upper realm? Not to mention how much strength he has left. Who in the main world can compare with him in terms of vision and knowledge? Who would want to be enemies with such a person? Yang Bai, the #1 merchant in the universe. He dares to boast like this not because of how big his business is or how many businesses he has, but because he's the only cultivator in the main world who could do business in the immortal court. There are imperial merchants in the human world and immortal merchants in the cultivation world. Immortals also need mortal goods from the lower realm, and they need his channels. It's not hard to imagine how rich he is. It's not something that can be measured by wealth and spiritual power. As long as the immortals in the immortal court casually leak something from between their fingers, it's enough to beat the brains of the people in the lower realm. Whoever dares to fight him will be smashed to death with all kinds of immortal artifacts. Snowy Feather sighed, while Serene shook her head. Since both of them had such backgrounds, there was really no need to fight this battle. He had to continue. Old Woman Foam, the messenger of the land of the Yellow Dragon. Under the immortal court, of course, it had to be different from other places. There had to be auspicious signs, colorful clouds, and gentle winds to set off the loftiness of the immortal court and increase the fantasy of the mortal world. Since there was a request, there must be someone below to take care of it. Bootlicking. Old Woman Foam was in this line of work. She had a real immortal artifact in her hands, and it was not the same as Qian Bai An's junk. One could well imagine her strength. Jiueming Zi. On the 8th day, the night watchman of the Tai Chi heaven, guest of Kunlun. On the 1st day, the night watchman of the Tai Huang Xingtian. Su Ren was a little puzzled. Aunt Shui often travels around the main world. This information is not something that ordinary people would know, but it's a little strange. Why are the night watchmen of Buddhism and Taoism from the lower heavens? On the 1st day, the 6th day, and the 8th day, there isn't even one from the 10 heavens. What about those of higher levels? Is there a reason for this? Snowy Feather sneered. That's why I said that you should come out more often. Don't just stay in the exterior realm and cultivate foolishly. You don't even know the ways of the world. Let me ask you, if you were a rich man in the mortal world and had a courtyard with 36 entrances and 32 dogs, some of these dogs are fierce, some of them have loud voices, some of them can eat, some of them are clingy, some of them are obedient, and some of them will pick up slippers for you. Then, where would you put the fierce dogs? Where would you raise the ones that can pick up slippers? Su Ren was speechless. I understand now. I can see that this swordsman did not offend the people of the main world, but the immortal court. Snowy Feather snorted. You finally understand. However, it's not entirely Lu Xiaoyi's fault. Their sword ancestor, Li Wuya, also played a very important role in it. As a result, they're like a rat crossing the street now, and have become the target of public criticism. What about the other three? Su Ren was a meticulous person. Snowy Feather shook her head slightly. The other three are unorthodox. Their origins are complicated and mysterious. I only know that 2 of them are from the earth. They are called Wu Shanwan and Tu Julang. As for the last one, I don't know. He didn't introduce himself either. Su Ren looked at these real experts that she could not even meet on a normal day. She could not help but sigh at the strength of the old order. As long as they made a call, they would immediately gather together. However, we were such a powerful group in the hundreds of thousands of years of struggle of the Vanguard Star. Just like what Snowy Feather had said to her before, there was actually a sense of dissatisfaction in the depths of her heart. She had hidden it very deeply and had never shown it to others. She would only reveal occasionally. For example, right now. The more powerful these people were, the more her heart would lean towards the swordsman's side. This was not sympathy for the weak. Cultivators would not have such cheap sympathy. She leaned towards the swordsman's side because she really detested these high and mighty so-called orthodoxies. The disgust that came from the depths of her soul was like a mountain pressing down on her body, preventing her from being free and unable to breathe. What were these people gathering here for? She could not ask. Snowy Feather was already very responsible for telling her the names and origins of each person. As for their battle plans, this was not something a captive should ask. Not long after, the group of people began to move, probably because they felt that everyone who should be here had arrived. To be more precise, it was the 5 hidden wings that began to move. The 5 winged men lined up in a pentagram formation. They each stood at the apex and secretly channeled their elemental energy. Under the circulation of a mysterious force, the space seemed to be different. She did not know much about the Tao of space, but since she had reached the demigod realm, she more or less had some understanding. She felt that the space around her seemed to be gradually being compressed. Snowy Feather was very relaxed. It was not only because her cultivation was high, but also because what they were doing now was not an explosive method of control. It was slow and gradual. She guessed what Snowy Feather was thinking and explained. "You feel it? You guessed right. What we're doing now is compressing the space." The swordsman's strength and unfathomable strength were largely due to the fact that the boundless space provided them with enough space to move freely. This allowed them to be fearless of the disparity in numbers. This was also the real reason why they were often able to fight when they were outnumbered. What we are doing now is compressing the space of the winged heaven and earth from the size of several universes to the limit of less than half a universe. In this kind of space, demigod realm cultivators would no longer be able to conceal their actions. The 10 or so people here can be fully used. This is the power of the old order. Not only do they have to take advantage of the number of people, they also have to take advantage of the geographical location. As for the timing, this is probably a threshold for the new power, right? Chapter 2233. As soon as Lu Xiaoyi was brought into the wings, spreading heaven and earth, he knew that he couldn't get out of this space after a few tries. This was the self-drawn space of the immortal rock. It had the power of a true immortal lattice. It was completely different from those immortal-like spaces and false immortal spaces. It was a little similar to the quicksand array on Melon Star, but it was even more unpredictable. Or rather, he didn't know where to start to break the restrictions of this space. This was the difference between mortal cultivators and immortals. It was a chasm, but he didn't panic. Even if it was the work of an immortal, it still had to abide by the rules of the heavenly Tao. In the end, if they wanted to touch him, they still had to do it. He was sure that he might encounter some strange people here. He didn't believe that these people would fight with him in a gentlemanly manner. As early as tens of thousands of years ago, such challenges had disappeared. The higher one's cultivation level, the more so. Only a small cultivator like Jean Dan, a foundation establishment cultivator, would be immersed in the so-called integrity of fairness. As one's cultivation level became higher and higher, one would realize that there was no fairness in the cultivation world. The other party's fighting power was not as good as yours, but you still hoped that the other party would foolishly come to you and challenge you fairly. This in itself was a kind of unfair. Fairness included many things, including having more connections and pulling in more helpers, being able to choose the battle environment, and being able to force you into a situation. These things were actually also a part of strength. He wanted to challenge an order, not a person. He should be prepared to be attacked by this order. Lu Xiaoyi was well aware of this, so he didn't care. One day, when others thought of him, Lu Xiaoyi, they would think of a force and subconsciously compare themselves to this force. Then they would give up and become people with their tails between their legs. That would be another kind of order, an order that belonged to him. When you want to challenge someone, you have to be prepared to face unfairness. Otherwise, don't cause trouble. He smiled slightly and patted the space of the small world. However, he suddenly realized that the small world was no longer there. It was just a layer of skin. What was left here was just a dot, a singularity. It was a little specious. He believed that even an immortal wouldn't be able to tamper with the small world he carried with him. Then, there could only be two possibilities as to why there was a problem. Either it was the old white tiger's doing, or it was blocked out by the immortal rock space. If it was the latter, he was afraid that he would really have to go through all the difficulties here. It was just that he had adjusted the difficulty of the game from hell to purgatory. It wasn't a big deal. He had basically seen all the people in the inner and outer scenic sky. He had never completely revealed his true strength and had always been suppressing it, trying his best to make himself look normal. He had been waiting for this day, waiting for the moment when his opponent revealed their true intentions. Just as he was about to leave, he stopped right before he moved. He carefully looked at the strange singularity and vaguely felt that something was wrong. If it was the immortal rock's spatial technique that had blocked out the small world that contained Lao Bai, it should not have left behind such a singularity. Or perhaps the singularity suddenly changed. From a single point, a vortex-shaped wormhole began to appear. It was like a funnel that kept spinning. The complicated spiral lines made one dizzy. Then, a mini white tiger jumped out from it. It grew in the air and turned into a majestic white tiger king. Just as he was about to speak, the singularity underwent another transformation as it spun. First, an elegant leg appeared. Then, the hem of a Taoist robe shook elegantly. Finally, a white, slender hand that was filled with power reached out from the vortex. What was wrong with this person? He was very arrogant. Did this mean, little ones, serve me? Lu Xiaoyi was a tactful and quick-witted person. He realized something and immediately went forward. He knelt on one knee and held the elegant hand with both hands while nodding and bowing. Lu Xiaoyi welcomes ancestor. That hand shook his hand away. A person with slanted eyebrows and a handsome figure came out. He stood upright and laughed at the sky. Xinyuan sword vein, 3 generations of the old, middle-aged, and young. This time we are all gathered. Lu Xiaoyi bowed. Greetings, Ancestor Lu. Chong Lu waved his hand. Call me senior brother. Lao Bai, as I said, this kid doesn't care whether you or I come or not. Look at him. He's pretending to be in fear and trepidation. In fact, he was thinking in his heart, these old guys are here to cause trouble for him again. Well, am I being a bit pretentious? But let me tell you, senior brother used to pretend like this. However, in terms of environment and situation, I'm far inferior to senior brother. Lu Xiaoyi was in a good mood. The battle after was not something he cared about. He valued the gathering of the old, middle-aged, and young more than anything else. No matter where they were, no matter what would happen in the future, Xuanyuan's top forces were gathered. What could stop them? With a wave of his hand, fine wine and delicacies from the storage ring were served. The 3 of them ate and drank heartily in the air. Only by eating and drinking well could one work well. This was Xuanyuan's tradition. Lao Bai swallowed a roasted lamb and said in a muffled voice, "You kid, you underestimate the heroes of the world. Do you think you can fool everyone with that lousy little world of yours?" If we hadn't replaced it with the oddity, you would have suffered a big setback this time. Lu Xiaoyi chuckled. Senior brother, Lao Bai, are you working together to deceive me? You've already made up your mind to use me as a cover to attract hatred. Chong Lu pointed at him. The universe is in chaos. The era is changing. Demons are dancing, and demons are running rampant. You so-called emerging forces don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. You don't understand the struggle of the great Tao. There's no one without you. In these hundreds of years, you've killed to your heart's content and stirred up enough trouble. Do you really think that those with vested interests are vegetarians and that you could dismantle their foundations? They're just waiting for the right time. When the time comes, they'll immediately plow the court and sweep the acupoints. That's their usual style. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. I'm in the middle of the situation and got a little carried away. Senior brother, you're a bystander. Chong Lu raised his cup and drank. Good wine. Is this the sweet potato at the foot of the Xianyuan mountain? It's something that I used to drink with my senior brothers and sisters when I was young. Little E, you're so considerate. Killing has its benefits. Let them know our strength. There's also a reason for stirring up trouble. Let the entire universe understand the general trend. But behind closed doors, we can talk among ourselves. We can't lose our lives. That's the absolute truth. All these years, I've been observing this opportunity in the inner and outer sky and all over the universe. That's why I asked Laobai to invite you. In fact, the two of us were already prepared. Little E, you're the main character. We old guys have to send you off no matter what. We're old and can't do our best all the time. You also have your own friends and your own circle. But at the critical juncture, Xuanyuan's tradition will never let someone face it alone. Chapter 2234. Demon Lord said it casually, but Lu Xiaoyi knew what it meant to be on the move for thousands of years. In Xianyuan, he was not the only one fighting, but he would not thank him, because this was also not a tradition of Xianyuan. Just like how they never thanked Li Wuya, it was meaningless. Finishing what he hadn't finished was the greatest gratitude he could give to him. Senior brother, I carried the small world with me. I didn't even feel it when you did such a thing. This is too magical. Demon Lord smiled. This is a lesson. Never carry that old thing with you. Otherwise, when he is hungry at night, he may treat you as a midnight snack. White Tiger roared to show his dissatisfaction. Demon Lord continued. This is Senior Brother's novel ability. I will teach you later. He comprehended the theory of a universe's singularity in a place called the Peach Blossom Spring. Later, because of the inner and outer scenic sky and the Sky Eyes teleportation, he could save on foot strength, so he never really put his heart into the arrangement of the singularity. However, although this theory of the singularity is troublesome to teleport, it has a different effect in space concealment. Don't underestimate the immortal Peng's space self-drawing. All living things can't be brought into this space without its consent. No matter where you hide, whether it's a spirit beast bag or a small world, we will not let you hide it. We consider that this time, the power of order might be finished in one fell swoop. So we took this opportunity to hide. I hope you don't disappoint me. Those who come are the real power of order, not those cats and dogs of the inner and outer scenic sky. White Tiger growled, no. I have a hunch that there are very few top experts of the inner and outer scenic sky among the people who come. I think they should be those experts who usually hide their strength and bide their time. This time, we will destroy a wave of them and see if they become fools by hiding their strength and biding their time. Demon Lord laughed. That's right. Old Bai has cultivated his body and mind for tens of thousands of years, but I think it's useless. He hasn't developed a good temper. The three of them drank and drank to their heart's content. They talked about everything except the danger they were facing. To them, this was just a normal experience in a swordsman's life. It was just like how an official had to attend court every day or a lady had to receive guests every day. They had done it every day in the past and would not stop in the future. It was a daily routine. What was there to talk about? Regardless of whether it was inside or outside the universe, history, past and present, time passed extremely quickly. Lu Xiaoyi cherished this opportunity very much, because he felt that if he wanted to have such an opportunity again in the future, he was afraid that he would not get it. Of course, they could feel the shrinking of space. Similarly, there was nothing new about it. After so many years, the other orthodoxies had only come up with the same few moves to counter the sword vein. There was nothing new about it. You want to constrict space and restrict the movement of the swordsman? A swordsman would still be a swordsman even if he were to hide in a bedroom with a sword in hand. They drank until the sky turned dark, until they sensed that the shrinking of space had stopped and everything around them became calm again. Demon Lord stood up and pushed his cup. Let's drink and eat to our heart's content. As the old saying goes, walk 100 steps after a meal. There's no need to go to the pharmacy. Shall we go now? The three of them walked side by side, and their killing intent began to rise slowly after drinking. Lu Xiaoyi did not know Li Wuya's true personality from what he heard, and thought. However, he now knew that he only valued Li Wuya's way of doing things. As a Xianyuan sword vein disciple who was widely acknowledged to be the most similar to the Crow ancestor, and had also received a lot of teachings from the Crow ancestor, this was the true style of the ancient swordsman, doing things his own way and scrupulous. He had found his own shortcomings. Most of the time, he lacked this kind of spirit to poke through the sky and sleep with it. But at the same time, he was also very clear that he could not have this kind of spirit, because his goal was to accomplish things, not to have fun. This was a well-planned ambush, but it was also an open and above-board battle. Up until now, they had already planned everything that needed to be planned. At their level, they wouldn't be so naive as to reveal their trump cards one by one in the middle of a battle. Sword cultivators weren't like that, and true experts weren't like that either, laying out the plan in advance, and then going all out to strike. The simplest way was the most effective way to fight. As for who their opponents were, they only had a rough idea, and it was limited to guessing who the power belonged to. As for the specific people, other than the possibility of Da Peng coming, they knew nothing else. But that was not important. They were going to die anyway, so what was the point of knowing so much? No matter who came, there were only 3 of them here. In Chong Lu's words, the suppression of a new power by the old order was ultimately the suppression of the sword vein by some people. There were many reasons, and it was not something that a swordsman could bear. From the time of Emperor Xianyuan and General Shi Zhao, there were already clues. When it came to Li Wuya, the sword vein's fate was already decided. When Lu Xiaoyi rose in revolt, it was only to put this kind of conflict on the surface, and there was no room for reconciliation between the two sides. Using the window of time when the era changed, it was completely resolved. They could not retreat, they could not compromise. There was no way out because the other side would not give the sword vein any chance to survive. Once they failed here, it would be the Dome, Mount E, and then the sword vein's orthodoxy that would expand to the entire universe. In the new power, the sword vein was the backbone. After the new era, it would be the world of the enterprising. After the new era, there would be no sword vein. Therefore, this was the last meal because it could really be the last meal. Lu Xiaoyi also put away the contempt in his heart. From the words of the 2 seniors, he knew that even the top experts of the inner and outer scenic skies were not qualified to participate in this hunt. One could imagine what kind of people would come. He was not familiar with these people. For people with weak wills, this might cause a certain psychological fear, and it would slowly manifest in the following battles. However, Lu Xiaoyi's brain circuit was relatively clear. His thought was, I don't understand you, but do you understand me? The auras in front of him were very clear, one after another. 20 auras were placed there without any restraint, without any concealment. This was also a kind of confidence of the opponent, a kind of involuntary psychological pressure. However, this kind of pressure was child's play to the 3 swordsmen who had just finished their farewell meal and drinking farewell wine. In the distance, a tall, decorated archway towered over the horizon. It was somewhat comical and inappropriate for such a thing to appear here, but this was a kind of thinking of the winged men. They were caught between 2 sides and were in a difficult position, so they could only stand on the side of the strong. However, they did not forget to put on a last piece of cloth to cover their embarrassment, to show that they had no other choice. In order to find an excuse, a line of words was hung on the archway. The winged men will never be slaves. Lu Xiaoyi smiled and added another line when he passed by, unless you provide food and accommodation. Chapter 2235. Su Ren was surprised to see 3 Taoists approaching from afar. In fact, she wasn't the only one who was surprised. The winged ones were surprised as well. The human experts were also surprised. Taoist Drunken Yang was the most impatient. He turned his head and looked in the direction of the winged man. Based on what I know, rock journeys 10,000 li is an immortal realm space. It can completely isolate unrelated people from appearing. Then, who were these two people? How did they get in? Was it a coincidence? Or is it artificial indulgence? This space was called Wings Spreading Heaven and Earth by the winged men, but it was called Rock Soaring 10,000 Li by the human cultivators. His real name should have been Rock of 10,000 Miles, but the winged man had made it vague in order to draw a clear line between himself and the rock. Taoist Drunken Yang's words were very blunt. In fact, he was asking if the other two people were secretly let in by the winged tribe. He couldn't take the blame for this. So Masterman immediately retorted, Rock travels 10,000 miles is the immortal realm, so it should be controlled by the immortal realm or the rock realm. We are only winged men. We can only order our maids around and provide the most basic elemental energy support, but we can't change the rules of the immortal realm. Fellow drunken son thinks too highly of us. Zhuai Yang was in disbelief and was about to say something when Zhu Mingzi stopped him. Calm down. Even in the immortal realm, there was no space in the cultivation world that couldn't be entered. Treasured realms that couldn't be broken were just some minor details, so why bother? 1 or 3, what's the difference? The Kunlun visitor smiled in agreement. I've observed the qi dynamics of these 3 people. They all originate from Xuanyuan's sword vein. That's good as well. We'll be able to gather them all together and catch them all in one fell swoop. It'll save us the trouble of running around in the future. There is also a difference in status between these people. Carefully speaking, the 3 36-day night watchers had a higher status. Their identities were noble, and they were among the dozens of people who were closest to the immortal court. Naturally, they took on the responsibility of leading the hunt. They didn't need to be specially elected. In the world of cultivation, especially in the old order, seniority and status could be measured. There were laws to be followed, but the rules wouldn't be broken. On the 6th day, the night watchman looked at the crowd. Who knows those two? Everyone looked at each other. In the end, it was the great snow mountain Shila of the interior sky who answered the question. He had been in the interior sky for 10,000 years, so he was familiar with every cultivator in the interior sky, even if they were rarely seen. One of them is called Chong Lu, a peak half-immortal with a lifespan of more than 20,000 years. He's from the same generation as Li Wuya. I'm very curious as to how he managed to live for so long. The other one was a strange beast who had once joined Xianyuan. His human identity was Xuanyuan's 6th ancestor, Wei Ji, but he was actually a white tiger. These two people were the cornerstones of Xuanyuan's sword faction. Together with Lu Xiaoyi, they represented Xuanyuan's past, present, and future. Therefore, I agree with fellow Taoist Kunlun. If we send these 3 away, the Xianyuan Sword School will be like a toothless tiger. They will no longer be a threat. The 3-night watchmen discussed and immediately made a decision. The original plan did not change, but the target changed from 1 to 3. The entire immortal rock space was compressed from several times the size of the universe to half the size of the universe. This was the limit of the immortal rock space. For these people, it was just right to be used as a battlefield. They would not be unable to move around because the space was too small, and they would not be unable to locate their opponents because the space was too big. Zhu Mingzi was the night watchman of the 8th day. In theory, his position was the highest. He did not hold back and looked at the crowd. Although there are 3 swordsmen, their sword vein orthodoxy would never team up with the 3 of them. This is not their style. If that's the case, then it's exactly what we want. They won't be so stupid. If 3 Dharma cultivators were surrounded here, they would definitely team up to support each other. However, this was not the swordsman's specialty. They would not team up to fight against the Taoist and Buddhist elites who were the best at formations. They would also lose the advantage of being able to move freely. Based on my estimation, they should be fighting on their own and then looking for opportunities to coordinate their tactics. Since that's the basic strategy, we should target them. I don't care about the specific techniques and tactics. Everyone has their own strengths, so just use them. I will only arrange for specific targets. Don't fight in a mess. Attack one person attack another. The sword vein orthodoxy is the best at fighting in a mess. Once our arrangements are messed up, their opportunity will come. Therefore, we have to set the battle targets. Does anyone have any objections? No one objected. This was the advice of an old man. It was also a combination of experience and practicality. From this, it could be seen that the night watchman of the 8th day did not lead a leisurely life. He was also very experienced in group battles. Since no one has any objections, I will make the decision. The 3 of us will each lead a team to target the 3 Xianyuan swordsmen. Once you have confirmed, I will say this first. Don't change your targets just because the opportunity is good. It will cause chaos, and it is unwise. I believe that on average, 6 people against 1 swordsman. With everyone's status in their respective fields, how can you not deal with 1 swordsman? This was a very good suggestion. Apart from a certain problem with the details, Minister Liu, as the night watchman of the 6th day and a Buddhist, also gave his own opinion. Fellow Taoist Zhu Mingzi, your Dafa needle is very accurate. Am I just going to talk about some small details here? Isn't it too conservative to divide the 3 teams equally? I think that between the 3 of them, we should focus on different arrangements based on their actual strength. We should try to create a gap in the shortest time possible. As long as we can break through one of their links, the rest will be easily solved. Zhu Mingzi was not stubborn. That's good. However, us old fellows don't move around the main world often, so we don't have much information. Fellow Taoist Shi Luo, since you're familiar with all 3 of them, why don't you tell us who is stronger and who is weaker among the 3? Shi Luo pondered for a moment. He knew the situation of these people. There were not many people in the interior and exterior world who were familiar with the situation of the main world. They were all high and mighty masters who did not care about worldly affairs. Only he and Zue Yang of the exterior world knew more about the situation. These 3 swordsmen were all from the interior world, so he had the most right to speak. If he did not handle this well, it could affect the outcome. He had to be cautious and had to have evidence. He could not just rely on hearsay and rumors. He had to have evidence and facts to back him up. Among the 3 swordsmen, we only have one real target, the youngest, Lu Xiaoyi. He is also the one who is most likely to break the balance in the changing of the eras. Just like Li Wuya of the Xianyuan Empire, what we want to eliminate is a potential, a possibility. For this, we have gathered a lot of forces and followed the principle of killing chickens with a group of ox cleavers. I don't know who is in charge. However, since I was notified, I came. It is my responsibility to contribute to the order. I believe that all of us are duty-bound to do so. However, please forgive my straightforwardness. I personally think that we are a little too paranoid and overly paranoid. Chapter 2236. Shi Luo was careful with his words. He was a cautious person and didn't want to mislead everyone with his judgment. Lu Xiaoyi has a brilliant battle record. Among the half-immortals in the main world, no one has been able to surpass him in the past few thousand years. He deserves to be known as the best swordsman in the rising power. But does this mean that he can crush those at the peak of the half-immortal level? 1 against 2? How many against? I don't think there is a necessary connection. My opinion is based on concrete evidence. Looking at his performance in the last few large-scale expeditions, I really haven't seen him fight against a few or even a dozen people by himself. In the world-ending Battle of Hung River, it was a large-scale battle. The strength of the people of Hung River was also limited. How could the battle of hundreds of sun gods and half-immortals be comparable? In the tug-of-war battle of the inner and outer Jingtian, due to the rules of the battle, it was at most 1 against 2 or 3. He did win, but it wasn't a sure win. There were still many exterior half-immortals who escaped from his hands. Wucho's illusion outside the road was a sneak attack. He killed countless people on the road of no return. But don't forget that he had the help of the Phoenix and the exterior Great Spear Mahjong. I have also carefully studied his life and found that instead of saying that he has unparalleled battle power, It is better to say that he is very good at taking advantage of others. He was always able to pull the battle to his side, but he would never recklessly fight to the death. If we don't consider that he does use a flying sword, I think he is more like a spell cultivator. He is proficient in the art of moving freely and has many friends. He has friends everywhere. If the one surrounding him is Li Wuya, I wouldn't mind even if there were so many people. But is such a person really the same as Li Wuya? Everyone nodded. As a cultivator, they didn't believe in rumors and didn't spread rumors. However, creating rumors was a basic quality. What were rumors? To these old foxes who had lived for tens of thousands of years, they were all too clear. They were all used to achieve a certain goal. There was one thing they were clear about. This Lu Xiaoyi was indeed different from the previous Li Wuya. Li Wuya relied on his strength. So to defeat him, they couldn't consider using force, but other aspects. They did so, and they did succeed. This was called avoiding the strong and striking the weak, playing to one's strengths and avoiding one's weaknesses. By the same logic, although this Lu Xiaoyi's strength was not bad, he did not seem to have reached the level of Li Wuya. Instead, he relied on his unhindered skills. Therefore, if he wanted to defeat him, he couldn't rely on the art of traversing. Instead, he had to use simple brute force. This was the basic idea that they had come here to solve the problem. Sheila continued. Originally, this was not a problem. Since we are all here, we don't care if he is strong or weak. However, since the situation has changed and two of his sword ancestors have appeared, we need to analyze his combat power in depth. Only then can we have a clear idea of what level he is at. Among the three targets, we need to have a clear idea of what level he is at. Zhu Mingzi could not hold it in any longer. This monk had a meticulous way of thinking and valued facts. His analysis was meticulous, and his judgment was clear. The only thing was that he was talkative. Tell me the conclusion. If you carry on with your analysis, the swordsman will come knocking on our door. Sheila smiled awkwardly. He liked this, but the time and place did not seem right. I think, among the three of them, Chong Lu is the strongest. He is unfathomable. Back then, he was known as the Demon Sword Lord. Now, I don't know how strong he is. As someone from the same generation as Li Wuya, he has learned a lot from Li Wuya. The older he is, the more dangerous he is. White Tiger's strength should be similar to Lu Xiaoyi's. But let's not forget that White Tiger is a beast. In terms of body and elemental energy, the current Lu Xiaoyi can't compare at all. Therefore, there must be a comparison. Chong Lu is the most important, White Tiger is the second, and Lu Xiaoyi is the least important. This is also the reason why he found these two helpers. If they're not as good as him, then what's the point of having such helpers? Sheila was the real deal. But more importantly, his way of thinking was in line with the mainstream way of thinking of these people. They looked down on the new forces and looked down on the young people. They valued the growth of age and strength, but they completely ignored the possibility that some people had actually spent most of their time as dogs. Therefore, rather than saying that they agreed with Sheila's view, it was better to say that they agreed with themselves more. They agreed with this ancient circle of people who kept to the old order. This was something in their bones that had been tainted for tens of thousands of years. Not to mention changing it, they could not even do it themselves. The three Night Watchers made a decision. Zhu Mingzi no longer hesitated. The three of us Night Watchers will each lead a team. I will lead 5 winged people, 2 Edwardian friends, and a traveler, a total of 9 people to deal with Chong Lu. The Kunlun friends will lead 6 Taoists to kill White Tiger. Master Lu of the Minister and his group of 4 monks hunted Lu Xiaoyi. With this as the foundation, we must not overstep it. We must control the battles properly, and do not give them the chance to interweave and gather. Everyone must remember, time is on our side. There is no need to rush. Everything should be done safely. If nearly 20 people besieging 3 swordsmen and causing a lot of casualties, it will be a disgrace to all of us. Everyone nodded in agreement. This was indeed a very good strategy. They had a clear grasp of the strengths and weaknesses between orthodoxies. Hidden Wings was the main force, supplemented by Edwardian friends and controlled by Mingzi. This was a classic strategy of using the body's qi and blood to fight against the old and experienced. There were 9 people in total, which was quite impressive. The Taoist besieging White Tiger was the authentic delaying tactic, using cooperation and experience in formations to wear down a strange beast with a strong vitality was what the Taoists were best at. The Buddhist sex oppression of Lu Xiaoyi seemed to be a little belittling of the main character. However, the abilities of these 4 monks were extraordinary. One was a night watchman, one was a sutra preacher, one was a Paiji monk, and one was an interior second severance. No matter how one looked at it, there was no reason for there to be any changes. Mingzi had spoken these words clearly to everyone and did not hide them. Once the battle started, everything would be known. There was no need to hide it, so the people at the side were also shocked. She was thinking, if she joined the swordsman group, how much pressure would she be able to share? The answer was very cruel. She might only be able to fight against one, and the result would depend on how long she lasted. Perhaps it would be more appropriate for her to stay here and watch the battle unfold. She looked at Snow Feather and said softly, "Aunt Snow, you must be careful. Don't think that there's only one swordsman surrounded by 9 people. That old swordsman is from the same era as Li Wuya." Snow Feather said helplessly, "Don't worry. I know a lot more about Li Wuya than anyone else. No matter if it's me or my senior brothers, they won't charge in recklessly. This is not our battle, so there's no need to risk our lives here." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.